Chapter 1945. The crater was hundreds of meters wide, and countless cracks spread out for thousands of meters. The mountain rocks were all shattered, and in the center of the crater there was a pitch-black crater that was only a meter wide. It was dozens of meters deep. Inside the crater, a weak aura gradually grew stronger. However, the aura was fluctuating, indicating that the owner of the aura was in a state of shock. Confusion filled Chumu's eyes. For a moment, he lost his will to fight. All along, no matter how difficult the situation was, Chumu had never given up. However, this time the enemy was too strong. It was beyond his imagination. It was not only the Battle King alone. There were other kings who were even stronger than the Battle King. Chumu did not think that the other kings of the imperial court would not deal with him after he killed the Battle King. Therefore, he was facing a huge mountain, a mountain that was almost impossible to climb. If his cultivation could increase again, he would have enough confidence. Unfortunately, his cultivation had already reached its limit. Unless he had enough time, dozens of years or even hundreds of years, he would be able to create a cultivation technique that could refine his true intent. Only then would he be able to step into the ranks of the peerless experts. Only then would he be able to continuously increase his strength and become even stronger. Relying on the secret technique to increase one's strength was not permanent. It could only last for a short period of time. Once the time was up or the power of the secret technique was used up, one's strength would return to its original level. His own cultivation would not be able to increase anymore. The enemy was too strong. It was like an insurmountable mountain. Despair filled his heart. Maybe I should give up now. A voice rang out in his heart. Chumu almost obeyed this voice and gave up resisting and gave up struggling. This was because this was an extremely difficult path, a path that was practically impossible to walk down. Maybe giving up was the best choice. However, he did not know why, but there was still a sense of unwillingness in his heart. I, Chumu, was a sword arts master in my past life. I held a sword in my hand and traveled thousands of miles. No matter what kind of predicament I encountered, I never gave up. I used the sword in my hand to break through everything. I reincarnated into ancient Sword Continent and faced countless difficulties. I never gave up. Along the way, I pulled out my sword and advanced. I encountered many powerful enemies whose cultivation and strength surpassed mine, but I never thought of giving up. I worked hard to catch up, constantly improving, constantly strengthening myself. Ancient Sword Continent, Primeval World, Ancient God World, Deep Blue World. I've been moving forward, stepping into one world after another, encountering one powerful enemy after another, encountering one difficulty after another. Could it be that I have to give up here? No, I cannot give up. My heart, my sword, I will not give up. I want to reach the pinnacle of the Sword Tao and reach the other shore of the Sword Tao. My path will not end here. Faith, a strong faith, was awakened from the bottom of his heart. It was an unyielding spirit that came from the depths of his soul. It was surging like a volcano erupting. His aura rapidly strengthened and stabilized. Moreover, it seemed to be more condensed. It was as if it had become purer after being tempered thousands of times. His injuries also seemed to be healing faster. Most importantly, Chumu felt that under the firm faith after shattering his confusion, the transformation of his sword intent seemed to be accelerating. Sword intent was a kind of will. It belonged to the spiritual level. Faith was also a spiritual level power. They were connected to a certain extent. When a faith was strong to a certain extent, it could affect one's own will. The annihilation sword intent was accelerating its transformation. It was more than 10 times faster than usual. Suddenly, a glimmer of hope appeared in his heart. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to fight against the Battle King. The difference between the half-third refinement and the true third refinement was too obvious. However, if he was able to use the sword intent, his strength would definitely increase once again. Moreover, it would not be a slight increase, but a huge increase. The reason was because the sword intent was the main element of the sword art. With the sword intent, all of his strength would have a backbone. His strength would definitely increase by 10 times or even more. At that time, he might have the strength to fight against a peerless third refinement expert. However, in the past, the transformation of the sword intent had been carried out naturally. The speed was neither fast nor slow. If it was at a normal speed, it would take some time for the transformation to be complete. But now, the transformation speed had suddenly increased by more than 10 times. Moreover, under the influence of his firm belief, it was still increasing. 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. The higher the increase, the greater the hope Chumu felt. The greater the hope, in turn, would affect the budding conviction, making it more and more resolute. The more resolute the conviction, the more it could affect the transformation of the sword intent, creating a virtuous cycle. 100 times. The transformation speed of sword intent had directly increased by more than 100 times. The transformation speed shocked Chumu. However, this was not the limit. It was still increasing. 1,000 times. With every breath, Chumu could feel his sword intent transforming and gradually perfecting. This transformation existed in his spiritual world. The outside world could not sense it. From the moment Chumu was struck down and fell into the pit, to when he was confused, to when he shattered his confusion and strengthened his faith, the transformation speed of sword intent had increased by 1,000 times. This process seemed to have taken a long time, but in reality, it had only been completed in a short breath. The person in the sky did not seem to be in a hurry to kill Chumu. Therefore, when he struck Chumu down, he did not immediately chase after him. If he immediately chased after him and struck out with another finger, Chumu would definitely die. Of course, if he really struck out with another finger, Chumu would not just sit there and wait for death. He still had a trump card, and that was the last chance of the sword sect spirit seal to summon Bai Ling. In the past, Chumu had always felt that Bai Ling was extremely likely to be a great emperor or holy king. However, after learning that the so-called holy sovereign was only a supreme expert who had undergone the 5th refinement and not a holy king, he began to doubt his previous thoughts. Perhaps Senior Bai Ling was very powerful, but he was not a holy king. He was a supreme expert. As for what level he was at, that was not something he knew. Chumu really did not know whether Senior Bai Ling was a supreme expert or a holy king. If he was a holy king, he would have to be careful when summoning him, because the grand Tao of this era could no longer withstand a holy king's attack. However, if he really encountered a situation where he could not resist at all, where he would definitely die, Chumu would have no choice but to summon him. At that time, he could only resign himself to fate. Fortunately, the Battle King had no intention of chasing after him. Chumu also did not know what the Battle King was thinking, but as long as he had time, it would be beneficial to him. Once he had enough time, his sword intent would finish transforming, and he would be able to use it. Faster, faster! Chumu thought to himself. The second breath passed, and the speed of the sword intense transformation was still increasing, as if there was no limit. Faith brought hope, and hope strengthened faith. This allowed Chumu to gain a deeper understanding of the power of faith. The place where he landed was quite a distance away from where Kong Lu and the others had fainted, so they were not too affected. The figure stood in the sky. His eyes seemed to be able to see through the earth. He can actually resist the invincible finger, the Battle King said to himself. He was extremely shocked. Even though I'm only a clone, and I can't use the full power of the invincible finger, an ordinary 3rd refinement initial stage cultivator would die under my finger. A mere half-step 3rd refinement initial stage cultivator can resist it without dying. Indeed, he is a rare monster. In the current world, no one can compare to him in terms of talent. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have provoked me. It turned out that this was only a clone of the Battle King. After using the invincible finger, The clone had used up a lot of energy. It was almost empty, so it could not launch a second attack. It was currently absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth to replenish its energy. It was precisely because of this that it did not immediately launch a second attack. He also had enough confidence. Although that finger attack did not kill his opponent, it had injured him. It was a serious injury, and it would be very difficult for him to recover. Even if he could recover, so what? His strength would soon be fully recovered. When that time came, he could unleash an even more tyrannical finger attack. It would be enough to kill Chu Mu and turn him into ashes. This was the confidence of the Battle King, one of the 10 kings of the imperial dynasty. His real body would not appear easily. The clouds in the sky surged. This was a scene formed by the yuan qi of heaven and earth. The Battle King's clone was recovering his strength, and Chu Mu was also recovering from his injuries. At the same time, he was also accelerating the transformation of his sword intent. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Very quickly, 10 breaths passed. The violent yuan qi of heaven and earth in the sky calmed down instantly. Because it was being absorbed from afar, it was not being absorbed. It instantly calmed down and flowed back like a hurricane, rushing in all directions. Die. After the Battle King's clone recovered his strength, he pointed out a finger attack. This finger attack was not the invincible finger. It was just an ordinary finger attack, but it contained a shocking amount of power. This was because the Battle King's clone had reached the middle stage of the 3rd refinement initial stage. He believed that even if Chu Mu's injuries were mostly healed within these 10 breaths, he would still not be able to resist this attack. The terrifying finger attack was like a sword piercing through the air. It was as if nothing could resist the power of this finger attack. It was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the finger attack landed on the 10-meter deep crater. At the same time, a terrifying wave of qi exploded from the crater. That was the qi of sword intent. It was extremely sharp, as if the heaven and earth were eternal. Obviously, it was an extremely high-level sword intent. Immediately after, a silhouette dashed out of the crater. His speed was extremely fast, and he transformed into an incomparably sharp sword light. Before the Battle King's clone could react, his sword had already arrived. Chapter 1946. Fast too fast. The sword light was like a shooting star that streaked across the sky, but also like an aurora that pierced through the void. It was indescribable. Wherever the sword light passed, it left a straight trace in the void. The trace still emitted an astonishing aura fluctuation. Its sharpness was unparalleled, as if it could exist for eternity. This was the power of the eternal sword will. From the moment Chu Mu unleashed all his power to the moment he was struck down by the Battle King's avatar and blasted dozens of meters into the ground. The entire process only took a few breaths. Therefore, the power of his secret technique was not used up much. It could still last for quite some time. Within the dozens of meters deep pit, Chu Mu's belief had completed a transformation. The attack of confusion was like an inner demon. It broke through the confusion and shattered the inner demon. His spiritual will was further enhanced. His spiritual world was several times more stable. His belief was firmer. Under the influence of his belief, his sword will had also completed its transformation. However, the annihilation sword will that had just completed its transformation still needed a little more time before it could fully integrate into the sword spirit. Therefore, before that, Chu Mu had used the eternal sword will. The eternal sword will was one of the most advanced sword wills. It possessed the power of eternity. In terms of destructive power, although it was not outstanding, it was actually hundreds or thousands of times more powerful than ordinary sword wills. Therefore, with Chu Mu's use of various secret techniques to reach the half-step 3rd refinement, after using the eternal sword intent, the power of his sword abruptly rose sharply, directly skipping the initial 3rd refinement stage and reaching the middle 3rd refinement stage. This kind of power shocked Chu Mu. The power of his sword increased by 100 times when he used the eternal sword will. It had a huge impact. Moreover, when he used the eternal sword will, the other forces seemed to have found their backbone and were highly controlled. This allowed their potential to be fully unleashed and transformed into power, increasing their power by 10 times. Such a huge increase, 1,000 times, caused Chu Mu's strength to skyrocket. From barely entering the third refinement, he directly reached the middle stage of the third refinement. Although he could only be considered to have entered the middle stage of the third refinement, he was still extremely powerful. With the help of the eternal sword will, Chu Mu's speed instantly exploded and reached the third refinement level. However, his speed was slightly slower and could only reach the initial third refinement level. The Battle King's avatar was shocked. Before he could say anything else, Chu Mu's sword light had already reached him. The Battle King's avatar felt a great threat and reacted immediately. Dodging, attacking with his finger, he continued to attack. Beams of powerful finger light pierced through the void like swords, shooting towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu swung his sword light, and under the control of the eternal sword will, he shattered the finger lights one by one. Then, the sword light spun and instantly condensed into one ray. Like an aurora, it pierced through the sky and pierced towards the warlord's avatar. Break! The Battle King's avatar pointed out again. His finger light shone brightly and shattered Chu Mu's sword light. His 10 fingers continuously flicked, and countless finger lights attacked from all directions like a storm. As the sword light was waved, it was like a line in the sky, shattering all the finger lights. Clouds and mist filled the air as the sword light pierced through the clouds. With a poochie sound, the extremely condensed and silent sword light hit the Battle King's avatar's body. However, strangely, no blood flowed out. This avatar was formed by the Battle King's power. It didn't have flesh and blood, so naturally it wouldn't be injured. However, the Battle King's avatar was extremely furious. He was a third refinement peerless cultivator. Even though it was just a clone, he still had the strength of a middle third refinement cultivator. Yet he had been hit by a junior who was countless years younger than him. Hitting the Battle King with one sword gave Chu Mu great confidence. The shadow in his heart from being hit by that finger had completely disappeared. Battle King, I'll kill you first, then destroy the imperial dynasty. Chu Mu shouted and slashed out again. His sword cut through everything in the world. The void simply couldn't stop Chu Mu's sword at all. It was as weak as tofu, directly sliced apart. The shocking sword light, wrapped in a pitch-black aura, instantly slashed down. Watch how I kill you with one finger. The Battle King's avatar was so angry that he laughed. Facing Chu Mu's powerful sword, he didn't have any intention of dodging. Instead, he pointed out a finger and said, "Invincible finger, heavens fall!" The invincible finger had 3 fingers. The first finger was Earth Crack, and the second finger was Heaven's Fall. Its power was much stronger than Earth Crack. As the finger shot out, it was as if the power of the entire sky was sucked in and merged into that finger. In front of Chu Mu's eyes, the sky retreated and the earth disappeared. The entire world seemed to have retreated into darkness, turning into nothingness. Only that finger was rapidly enlarging in front of him, filling his eyes. That finger strike was capable of shattering the heavens and shattering the sky. This finger used up all of the Battle King's avatar's strength. After using it, the Battle King's avatar became blurry, like a candle in the wind, about to disappear. However, he quickly absorbed the yuan qi of heaven and earth to replenish his energy. His body slowly solidified. The power of this finger could shake one's mind, causing one to lose the chance to defend. If one was hit, it would shatter just like the sky. If it was before, Chu Mu wouldn't have been able to defend at all. But now, after experiencing the torture of his soul, he had broken through his confusion and destroyed his inner demons. His will was sharpened and his faith was strengthened. He wasn't affected at all. Heaven and earth cross/. The heaven and earth cross slash that was infused with the eternal sword intent was more than 1,000 times stronger. The indescribable sword light was so bright that it looked like the sun had turned into a cross. In addition to the power of the eternal sword intent, the heaven and earth cross sword light was like a mark in the sky. The heaven's fall finger and the heaven and earth cross slash clashed instantly. The heaven and earth seemed to have been destroyed. The world seemed to have disappeared without a sound. The color was black and white, then it turned gray. At the place where the heaven and earth cross slash and the heaven's bane finger collided, no sound was heard. Instead, a black hole appeared. It was the result of the space being unable to withstand the power of the two attacks. The black hole produced a terrifying suction force that crazily devoured everything in its surroundings. The light that was shattered by the two attacks was all absorbed by the black hole. It didn't affect the surroundings at all. However, the aura made Chu-Mu and the Battle King's avatar's face change. It was obviously very terrifying. It seemed like 1,000 years had passed, but it was also just a moment. The black hole seemed to have devoured enough energy and closed up again. Chu-Mu didn't stop. He held his sword and attacked the Battle King's avatar. At this moment, the Battle King's avatar had used up all of his energy after using the heaven's bane finger. He hadn't fully recovered yet. Facing Chu-Mu's two swords, he could only dodge continuously in an attempt to buy some time for his energy to recover. However, in front of Chu-Mu's heart sword as one, all dodging was useless. The two swords were berserk, and each strike was fatal. Sword light was everywhere, covering all directions and covering everything. The Battle King's avatar, who hadn't fully recovered his energy, was in a very sorry state. His body was constantly hit by the swords. Although he wasn't made of flesh and blood and wouldn't bleed, it would cause the energy in his body to dissipate and greatly delay the recovery of his energy. In the blink of an eye, Chu-Mu had stabbed out thousands of times. At least 1/10 of them had hit the Battle King's avatar. The result of hundreds of swords hitting the Battle King's avatar was undoubtedly terrifying. The energy that had just recovered dissipated once again, and the Battle King's avatar became weak. Although Chu-Mu wasn't sure why the Battle King was like this, he could sense that the Battle King's aura was constantly weakening. He took the opportunity to use the Zhen Tian sword style. After such a long time, Chu-Mu's attainments in the Heart Sword as one had deepened. He had also integrated the Heart Sword style into various sword styles, except for the Great Heavens Might Sword style and the Heavenly Slaughter and Earthly Calamity Sword style, as well as the newly comprehended Eternal Sword style. Zhen Tian's sword style was extremely violent. It was controlled by the Eternal Sword intent, integrated with the Sword intent and Tremor intent, integrated with the Divine Wilderness Sword essence, integrated with the Sage physique, integrated with the Blood Prison Heaven Burning Force, integrated with the Sword Domain Transformation Force, integrated with the second stage of the Sword God's Descent Secret Technique, integrated with the Metal Spirit, and executed with the Eternal Spiritual Sword. The Eternal Sword intent was enhanced by the Eternal Spiritual Sword, and the Life Sword Spirit's power was also integrated into it, causing its power to constantly increase until it reached a terrifying level. The sword lashed out with unparalleled power. The Battle King's avatar's energy was severely weakened, and he couldn't resist at all. He was directly hit by the sword, and he could only feel the terrifying power vibrating and spreading throughout his body. With a bang, the Battle King's avatar's body was torn into pieces, and it was continuously attacked by the terrifying power collapsing into pieces. A spiritual light instantly shot out from the shattered body, flying into the distance at an extremely fast speed. Chu-Mu saw the silver light spiritual sword quickly stabbing out, and a cold silver light like a meteor piercing the moon struck the Battle King's avatar's avatar, causing a mournful scream to ring out. However, this sword did not shatter the Battle King's avatar's avatar, but the Battle King's avatar's avatar had dimmed a lot. Chu-Mu, in a few days my true body will personally come and kill you. The Battle King's avatar quickly escaped, leaving behind a threat. The Battle King's avatar was too fast, and Chumu couldn't chase after it, so he could only give up. However, he didn't stop the power of the secret technique and maintained the tyrannical aura of the middle third refinement, spreading out in all directions and suppressing the 4 Cs. So it's just a Battle King's avatar. Chumu thought to himself as he stared in the direction where the Battle King's avatar had disappeared. His fighting spirit was surging, and at the same time he was extremely shocked. Just a Battle King's avatar had the strength of the middle third refinement. Then what about the Battle King's true body? The upper third refinement, or the peak of the third refinement? After about 10 breaths of time, Chumu stopped the secret techniques one by one and withdrew the eternal sword will. His aura continued to fall, and in the end, it returned to the middle third refinement. As soon as he stopped the secret techniques, Chumu immediately felt weak. He hurriedly took out various pills and consumed them to replenish the consumption of his essence blood, sword origin, and spiritual power. As he recovered his strength, Chumu landed where Feng Wuhan and the other 4 were unconscious, waking them up one by one. Chapter 1947. The spiritual light quickly returned to the imperial court and entered the Battle King's forehead. The Battle King's body trembled as he opened his eyes. A trace of fierceness and viciousness flashed through his eyes. His pale face turned ferocious before returning to normal. That speck of spiritual light was the spiritual light he had split off from his origin spirit. It contained a portion of his origin spirit's power and consciousness. Because of that, the Battle King knew everything that had happened after the spiritual light returned. It was because he knew that his expression was so ugly. Originally, he had split off a bit of his Yuan spirit's spiritual light to control his energy clone to kill Chumu. With his strength of the third refinement, he could easily kill Chumu and the others. He didn't expect that the situation would be out of his control and an unforeseen event would occur. That Chumu not only didn't die from his earth-splitting finger, but instead possessed an even more terrifying strength, enough to contend against his energy doppelganger. As for the energy doppelganger's energy doppelganger, it was ultimately defeated. Furthermore, when his bit of divine light left his body, it was stabbed by Chumu's sword. Although it wasn't destroyed, it was still wounded. After the spiritual light was injured, his Yuan spirit would be affected as well. He would need a period of time to recover. Otherwise, there would be bad consequences. What the Battle King couldn't understand was why Chumu, whose strength had reached the half-step third refinement after using various secret techniques, was able to explode with strength comparable to the middle stage third refinement after being wounded. Was it another secret technique? However, in this world, what kind of secret technique could increase someone's strength from the half-step third refinement to the third refinement? If there is such a secret technique, I must obtain it. The Battle King said in a low voice. If he obtained it and used it at a critical moment, his strength might be able to reach the peak of the third refinement, or even the fourth refinement. Thinking of this, the Battle King's heart burned with passion. Chumu, wait until I recover. My original body will personally come and capture you alive. The Battle King thought to himself. A sharp light shot out from his eyes. The side effects of using such a secret technique must be great. It won't be easy to recover. Unbeknownst to the Battle King, Chumu's strength had soared from the half-third refinement to the intermediate third refinement, not because of some earth-shattering secret technique, but because of the eternal sword intent. Sword intents were divided into ordinary attributes and high and low levels. The difference between the high and low levels was 10 times or even dozens of times. Ordinary low-level sword intents did not increase one's strength significantly. At most, it would increase one's strength by 2 or 3 times. However, sword intents were more powerful than ordinary sword intents. Naturally, the increase in strength would be more obvious. Chumu's sword intents were at the highest level. Moreover, his eternal power was also one of the most advanced attributes. The combination of the two highest levels created an even more powerful existence. Moreover, sword cultivators should focus on sword intent. They should control the strength in their body and perform sword techniques. A sword technique without sword intent was like a machine without a core, and its power could not be unleashed to the extreme. Therefore, when using the eternal sword intent, Chu Mu's strength skyrocketed by 1,000 times, directly skipping the half-step third refinement, the initial stage third refinement, the peak of the initial stage third refinement, and reaching the middle stage third refinement. If the Battle King knew that it was his finger that had caused Chu Mu's belief to transform and accelerated the transformation of his sword intent, who knew if he would be annoyed? You said that was the Battle King's clone? Feng Wuhan and the others stared at Chu Mu with wide eyes. It was just a clone, but its power was enough to make them vomit blood and faint. If the real body was here, how terrifying would it be? A single aura would be enough to kill them. Although it's just a clone, it has the strength of the intermediate third refinement, said Chu Mu. Intermediate third refinement. Hearing this, everyone was stunned at first. Then they smiled bitterly. The strongest among the 5 of them was only Feng Wuhan, who was at the peak of the second refinement. Perhaps if he used all his strength, he could barely be considered a half-third refinement. However, there was still a huge gap between a half-third refinement and a real third refinement, not to mention the intermediate third refinement. That's not right. If the Battle King's clone has the strength of the intermediate third refinement, why are we still alive? Wang Sun's mind worked quickly, and his eyes widened as he exclaimed, "Could it be that he was kind enough to let us go?" Lei Ba rarely cracked a joke, but it was a cold one. How could the Battle King let them go? "I killed his clone," said Chu Mu. "Killed him? You killed the intermediate third refinement clone of the Battle King." Everyone screamed. They couldn't help but scream, and they couldn't help but be shocked. They had fought side by side with Chu Mu before, so they knew very well how strong he was. If he could kill the Battle King's clone, didn't that mean that Chu Mu's strength had also reached the third refinement? In the past, due to some reasons, I couldn't use my sword intent. This time, I was lucky enough to survive the Battle King's clone's attack. It was a blessing in disguise, and I can use my sword intent again. So my strength increased greatly. Chu Mu explained simply. Everyone's eyes widened. They felt as if they were listening to a heavenly book. Unable to use his sword intent, his strength was insufficient. But now, not only did he survive the Battle King's clone's attack, he could use his sword intent again, and his strength increased from the half-third refinement to the third refinement. Being able to kill the Battle King's clone, who had the strength of the intermediate third refinement, felt like a legend. The increase in sword intent, is it really that great? Lei Ba mumbled. He was a lightning cultivator, and he didn't have sword intent. Therefore, he wasn't very clear about the power of sword intent. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be that great, but Feng Wuhan said, looking at Xia Yongxuan. Both of them were sword cultivators, and extraordinary ones at that, so they knew better. Unless it's an extremely high-level sword intent. Xia Yongxuan said, Feng Wuhan's sword intent wasn't low. It was a heaven-level sword intent, and it was the wind sword intent. Xia Yongxuan's sword intent was also a heaven-level sword intent, the Great Sorrow sword intent. Their sword intents greatly increased their swordsmanship, making them even more powerful. But even so, their sword intents didn't increase their strength as much as Chu Mu's. Could it be that Chu Mu's sword intent had surpassed the heaven level and was a god-level sword intent? Moreover, it was the best of the god-level sword intents. Chu Mu, can you release your sword intent? Feng Wuhan asked seriously, his tone somewhat pleading. Xia Yongxuan also looked at Chu Mu with a hopeful gaze. This wasn't a big deal, so Chu Mu naturally wouldn't refuse. He released his eternal sword intent. An immortal, everlasting and eternal aura suddenly spread out. Within it, there was an extreme sharpness that pierced through the underworld and tore the sky apart. It was incomparable. "It's an elemental sword intent, and it's the best one," Feng Wuhan exclaimed. "This sword intent is so strong. I've never felt it in my life." Xia Yongxuan also sighed. His tone seemed even more lonely. "So you haven't used your full strength before?" Lei Ba's eyes widened as he stared straight at Chu Mu. "Tell me honestly, how much strength are you hiding?" What he said was actually correct. If he couldn't use his sword intent, it meant that Chu Mu hadn't used his full strength. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't want to use his full strength at that time, but there was no other way. Now it was different. "I have 2 sword intents that belong to the same level, but the other one has just completed its transformation, so I can't use it yet." Chu Mu said, "Dual sword intents, and they're of the same level." Everyone was even more shocked. However, even if it was dual sword intents, it could only make the sword intent more versatile. It couldn't let the power of the 2 sword intents overlap, so it didn't increase one's strength. It was more of a potential in the way of the sword. Therefore, they didn't ask about the other sword intent in detail. Otherwise, if they knew that it was a purely destructive sword intent, and although it was of the same level as the eternal sword intent, it was much more destructive, who knew how shocked they would be? After a while, everyone calmed down. However, the way they looked at Chu Mu was a little different from before. After all, even if Chu Mu had displayed the strength of a half-step to the 3rd refinement in the past, his strength was still at the 2nd refinement. However, now that he had defeated the Battle King's clone, he was at least at the 3rd refinement. It was a different level. At the end of the day, it's all about strength. We're still too weak. If we had the strength of the 3rd refinement, even if it's just the initial 3rd refinement, we wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Is there any way to increase our strength faster? Lei Ba asked. We've already entered the ice secret territory and refined the frigid jade essence. Even if we get the frigid jade essence again, it won't increase our strength to the 3rd refinement. Kong Lu said, The only thing we can do now is to go there. Xia Yongxuan said, as if he had made up his mind. Where is that? Lei Ba asked quickly. At this time, he would be very enthusiastic about anything that could increase his strength. The others also looked at Xia Yongxuan. The great demon burial abyss. Xia Yongxuan said these words word by word. Every word contained an unknown power that made everyone's hearts beat faster and their blood flow seemed to be reversed. Feng Wuhan and the others' faces were solemn. Only Chu Mu was not affected because Chu Mu had no idea what the great demon burial abyss was. He just felt that it was not a simple place. You've been there before? I've been there before. Xia Yongxuan said. He seemed to have thought of something, and the sadness in his eyes became more obvious. The great demon burial abyss is rumored to be extremely terrifying, but it also has great opportunities. Let's go there and try our luck. If we can obtain great opportunities, our strength will definitely increase again. At that time, we will have more confidence to fight against the imperial dynasty. Everyone said resolutely. Originally, their will to become stronger was not that firm. However, after the Battle King's clone suppression, their will was strengthened by 100 times. Chapter 1948. In the deep blue world, in the ancient era, sage emperors were revered. Experts were everywhere. That was a glorious era, an era of prosperity, an era that countless people yearned for. In that era, the sage emperors had opened up their own territories. They ruled over their own territories, dividing the deep blue world from the outside. In that era, experts were born in large numbers. In order to fight over opportunities, resources, and strength, there were endless battles. Between individuals, between factions, and even between territories, there were endless battles. There were countless casualties. In the ancient era, there was a sage emperor called the Devil Emperor. He was the leader of the devil path. There was another sage emperor called the Tao Emperor. He was the leader of the righteous path. The righteous path and devil path were led by the Tao Emperor and Devil Emperor to a decisive battle between the righteous path and devil path. That battle caused the heavens and the earth to collapse. Numerous saint exalts and countless experts perished, causing blood to form rivers and corpses to form mountains. The battle between the Tao Emperor and Devil Emperor even caused the sky to collapse and black holes to appear. Both of them were at the peak of saint emperors, and they were invincible. They used all their strength and abilities to battle for 10 days and 10 nights. The ground had collapsed countless times, and they'd even destroyed 2 territories. The Tao Emperor and Devil Emperor were too powerful. After 10 days and 10 nights of continuous fighting, not only did they cause destruction to the earth, but they also affected the operation of the heavenly Taos of the deep blue world. Worried that if they continued fighting, the heavenly Taos of the deep blue world would collapse, the Tao Emperor ignited his own Yuan spirit and unleashed an unprecedented attack on the Devil Emperor. That attack had completely destroyed the 2 domains and killed the Devil Emperor, causing them to sink down into the depths of the abyss. The Devil Emperor's death caused the morale of the Devil Path's experts to plummet. The Righteous Path's morale soared, and they killed even more Devil Path experts. That battle was known as the Battle of Devil Fall. Because countless Devil Path experts had died in that battle, the Devil Path's inheritance had been severed. Although a portion of it had been passed down in the future, the Righteous Path had flourished. They hunted down Devil Path cultivators everywhere. They were like rats on the street, and they completely declined. As time passed, the Devil Path gradually faded from people's sight. In the later generations, although there were people who obtained some demonic cultivation methods, there were not many of them. Moreover, due to the changes of time, the concept of the righteous path and the demonic path became blurred. Therefore, no one looked into it anymore. During the Great War between the righteous and demonic paths, the 2 great regions had sunk, which was equivalent to being buried with the Devil Emperor. Countless demonic path experts had also lost their lives. Therefore, the abyss that appeared was named the Great Devil Burial Abyss. In the Demon Burial Abyss, apart from the deaths of countless demon path experts, there were also many righteous path experts who had fallen. Therefore, there were countless opportunities in the Demon Burial Abyss. If one could obtain them, one's strength would increase. Of course, with opportunities came terrifying dangers. The battle between the Tao Emperor and Devil Emperor affected the operation of the Heaven Tao. Along with the passage of time, the Heaven Tao gradually weakened, and it became more and more difficult for it to support the strength of the sage emperors. Up until the current era, the sage emperors had no choice but to enter into closed-door cultivation so as to avoid affecting the operation of the Heaven Tao and causing the world to collapse. It was also because of the weakening of the Heaven Tao that the strength of the sage emperors was clearly affected. Once they attacked, their strength would dissipate even faster, which was extremely disadvantageous to them. Therefore, in this era, the sage emperors did not appear. They were peerless existences. As the era changed and the Heaven Tao weakened, the Great Devil Burial Abyss, formed by the collapse of the 2 great regions, also changed. The majority of people did not even know of the Great Devil Burial Abyss existence. However, there were still a few experts who knew. Furthermore, there would also be people who would enter in an attempt to obtain opportunities and soar. However, in the past, most of the cultivators who entered the Great Devil Burial Abyss would die in there. There were very few who could come out alive, and those who could obtain opportunities and become even stronger were even rarer. Xia Yongxuan was one of the lucky ones who had obtained a fortuitous encounter, and his strength had clearly increased. But to him, he would rather not have this fortuitous encounter, because obtaining this fortuitous encounter would mean losing his beloved wife. But he had no choice. Hearing everyone's introduction of the Great Devil Burial Abyss, Chu Mu's interest was immediately piqued. The 6 of them, with Xia Yongxuan leading the way, quickly flew in the direction of the Great Devil Burial Abyss. According to Xia Yongxuan, the Great Devil Burial Abyss was always moving and was not fixed in one place. However, Xia Yongxuan had entered the Great Devil Burial Abyss a few decades ago, and the Great Devil Burial Abyss movement speed was not very fast. Furthermore, it was very large, so if they went in this direction, even if they could not directly find the Great Devil Burial Abyss, they would still be able to trace it. However, from here, it would take at least half a year to reach the Great Devil Burial Abyss with their second refinement flying speed. Fortunately, they had been moving at high speed, so it would not be easy for strong enemies to intercept them. Moreover, the battle above the Sky Mountain of the Sky Mountain region had let many peerless experts see Chu Mu's terrifying strength. It also let them know that the Sky Clan's Sky Kill order was not something they could covet, so they gave up. As for those peerless experts of the triple refinement, they were usually existences with extremely high status in those superpowers. Although they also yearned for the Tian clan's martial way, spirit spells, and heavenly god's secret realm, they were limited by their status, their dignity, and so on. They were not willing to rush about for the rewards of the Tian clan. The third refinement was unwilling to take action. The second refinement was not their opponent, and the first refinement was like an ant. Chu Mu and his group were not intercepted at all. Although the Sky Clan's divine prohibition guards were all mobilized, the deep blue world was very big. It would not be easy for them to find Chu Mu and his group, let alone Chu Mu and his group, who were moving at high speed. Chu Mu was different from other experts in one point, and that was that he could multitask. Therefore, even while flying, a part of his mind was used to travel, and the other part was used to comprehend the sword heaven and earth. This true God sword sect's secret manual was broad and profound. Even with Chu Mu's current attainments in the sword way, he was unable to comprehend all of it. He could only comprehend a small part of it. Of course, splitting his mind to comprehend was not as good as comprehending with all his might, but it was better than not comprehending with all his might. The third part of his mind was used on the nurturing of the spiritual sword. Dozens of years ago, he had obtained the sword embryo of the innate spiritual sword from the heavenly ancient sacred palace, left behind by the heavenly ancient sacred emperor. It was nurtured in his dantian, and was constantly nourished by the divine, desolate sword essence. It should have already taken shape and become a true spiritual sword. But because the innate spiritual sword embryo had astonishing potential and its growth was extremely strong, Chu Mu planned to nurture it into an existence similar to the eternal spiritual sword. Therefore, he suppressed the growth of the innate spiritual sword embryo and planned to transform it after obtaining the second type of sword intent. Now that the annihilation sword intent was complete and could be used, it was the best time to nurture the spiritual sword. The destructive power of the annihilation sword intent was extremely shocking, far surpassing the eternal sword intent. If the Battle King's avatar's spiritual light was hit by the annihilation sword intent, it would definitely be destroyed, unable to escape. More than 10 days later, the innate spiritual sword embryo finally became a spiritual sword. The moment the spiritual sword was formed, Chu Mu immediately mobilized the power of the annihilation sword intent and injected it into the spiritual sword. Bit by bit, he was afraid that the spiritual sword would be destroyed. Under the annihilation sword intent, the spiritual sword also changed bit by bit. It was a kind of change in nature, a kind of metamorphosis. The complete metamorphosis of the spiritual sword required a period of time. But compared to the metamorphosis of the sword intent, it was much faster. Every day, Chu Mu could feel the changes in the spiritual sword, little by little. Once the spiritual sword had completely transformed into the annihilation spiritual sword, the annihilation sword intent would be amplified, and its power would be even more powerful. Furthermore, he could refine the death sword spirit into the spiritual sword, making it even more powerful and allowing him to comprehend new sword moves. He could even combine the two swords, combining the sword spirits of life and death. it would be even more profound. Time flew by. The divine guard of the Celestials searched everywhere for Chu-Mu and the others, but they did not know that Chu-Mu and the others had already flown in the direction of the great devil burial abyss. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. The injuries to the Battle King's soul had also healed. Chu-Mu, you should feel honored that I have to personally take action. With a low roar, the Battle King's body vanished from the hall in an incomprehensible manner. In the next moment, he appeared tens of thousands of meters away from the imperial court. He turned into a streak of light, tearing through the sky as he flew towards the place where his avatar had descended. He did not know where Chu-Mu and the others had gone, but as long as he arrived at the place where his avatar had descended, he would be able to sense the fluctuations of auras from Chu-Mu and the others. Through their auras, he would be able to chase after Chu-Mu and the others, killing them all. Then he would capture Chu-Mu alive and interrogate him for various secret techniques. Back then, I kept going forward from here until I finally entered the great devil burial abyss. In the air, the 6 silhouettes stopped. Xia Yongshuan pointed forward as he spoke. The place he was pointing at was filled with darkness. That darkness was like a bottomless abyss. Seems like after so many years, we still haven't left the great devil burial abyss. Feng Wuhen said. Yes, but after so many years, going forward and entering the great devil burial abyss is definitely different from back then. Xia Yongshuan continued, if we can find the place where we entered back then, maybe it would be less dangerous and we would be able to go deeper. Everyone knew that in the great devil burial abyss, the deeper one went, the higher the chances of obtaining good fortune. But at the same time, the deeper one went, the greater the danger one would encounter. Since ancient times, no one had ever been able to come out alive from the depths of the great devil burial abyss, let alone reach the central region. The goal of Chu-Mu and the others was not to go deeper into the great devil burial abyss. They only wanted to obtain good fortune and increase their strength. Of course, it would be best if they could raise their strength to the 3rd refinement in the shortest time possible. Chapter 1949. Darkness surrounded them like a dark and desolate domain, greatly affecting their vision. Even though Chu-Mu's eyesight was amazing, far better than Feng Wuhen and the others, he could only see 1,000 meters away. Beyond that, it was a blur, and beyond that, it was pitch black. The coldness kept drilling into their bodies. This coldness was not the coldness of the temperature dropping to the extreme, but a kind of gloomy coldness. It was the gloomy coldness formed by the accumulation of countless yin qi after the death of too many creatures. This kind of coldness was more terrible than simple cold. The coldness would only freeze people, but the gloomy coldness would not only coagulate people's blood, it would even affect the body's vitality. After a long time, one's vitality would be depleted and death qi would spread. Eventually, one would become a living dead and could only survive in the great demon burial abyss, unable to leave for eternity. Moreover, this kind of gloomy coldness would also affect one's mind, creating illusions, and even causing one to completely lose consciousness. All in all, as soon as they entered the great demon burial abyss, everyone felt an amazing, gloomy coldness invading them from all directions, trying to penetrate their bodies and their spiritual world, eroding their qi, blood, bones, organs, and minds. What a terrifying place, Kong Lu muttered in a low voice. His voice was abrupt and soul-stirring in this spacious and quiet place. Even a 9-star saint-level cultivator cannot stay in such a place for a long time. Otherwise, they will definitely be eroded. Chu-Mu said he could clearly feel that the invasion was continuous, like a virus that was trying to infect his body and mind. Even a 9-star saint-level cultivator can only walk in the periphery of the great demon burial abyss and cannot stay for more than 6 hours. Otherwise, they will lose their consciousness, and their bodies will be eroded by the gloomy coldness, and they will become a wandering corpse, Xia Yongshuan said. Xia Yongshuan said he had been to the great devil burial abyss before and had a deeper understanding of it than Chu-Mu and the others. The so-called wandering corpses were the corpses that wandered around. They were the living dead. There are 4 sources of danger in the great devil burial abyss. Xia Yongshuan said seriously, the first kind is the so-called wandering corpse, which is the lowest level of danger. The second kind is the nether spirit, which is formed after the bodies and primordial spirits of the experts who entered the great devil burial abyss were destroyed and their consciousness was eroded. They are even more terrifying than the wandering corpse. The third kind is the devil spirit, which is even more terrifying. It is formed by the primordial spirits of the experts who died in the ancient times, devouring each other and absorbing endless evil qi. The fourth kind is the other practitioners, whose level is closely related to the strength and ability of the practitioner. Even though the practitioners who entered the great devil burial abyss were an insignificant portion of the practitioners as a whole, there were still some. Moreover, the practitioners who dared to enter the great devil burial abyss were either desperate for various reasons and had no choice but to enter. If they couldn't win, they would die in there. If they could win, they would obtain an opportunity and become stronger. Otherwise, they were lunatics who fought to survive and pursued extreme challenges. This kind of person had astonishing perseverance, firm will, incomparably tenacious and unshakable, and acted without scruples. They were very scary. Everyone listened to Xia Yongshuan seriously. At this time, they couldn't relax. In a place like the great devil burial abyss, no matter how powerful one was, one careless mistake could cost one's life. However, no matter what, the 6 of them had the strength of at least the second refinement. Therefore, they could withstand the erosion of the gloomy coldness very well. An ordinary 9-star saint-level cultivator could resist for 6 hours in the periphery. After 6 hours, they would be eroded. If it was a 9-star saint-level cultivator who was more powerful, they would naturally be able to resist the erosion for a longer period of time. A first refinement, peerless expert was 10s or even 100s of times stronger than a 9-star saint-level cultivator. Hence, in a place like the periphery, one could basically stay as long as one wanted. Chu Mu and the others had the strength of at least the second refinement. Even if they went deeper, they could still last for a long time. It's here. The warlord descended from the sky. He stretched out his hand as if he had caught something. It was a strand of qi. After carefully sensing the ripples of the first refinement qi, the warlord moved again. He followed the tracks of Chumu and the others and came to a valley. He caught another strand of qi and followed it again. When Chumu did not use his secret sword will, his strength was at the second refinement. Feng Wuhen and the others were also at the second refinement. However, there were differences in their strength, so there were differences in their speed. However, since they were traveling together, they naturally moved together. Therefore, they maintained the speed of the advanced second refinement. This speed was 100% of the warlord's speed. With their advanced second refinement flying speed, it took them half a year to reach the great devil burial abyss. The warlord was a third refinement cultivator. Moreover, he was a peerless third refinement cultivator. Although he was not good at speed, his flying speed was still at the advanced third refinement. It was at least 10 times faster than an advanced second refinement cultivator. Chu Mu and the others needed half a year to reach the great devil burial abyss, but the warlord did not need 10 days. Looking at the darkness in front of them, it was as deep and gloomy as the abyss. Just one look was enough to make one's heart palpitate. Even the warlord, who was at the advanced third refinement, felt the same. Could this be the great devil burial abyss? The warlord's expression changed drastically. As one of the 10 lords of the imperial court and one of the few advanced third refinement cultivators in the deep blue world, the warlord had lived for a long time and had seen a lot. Naturally, he knew of the great devil burial abyss. Although he had never entered the great devil burial abyss, his understanding of it was more detailed than Xia Yongshuan's. It was precisely because he knew more about the great abyss of the devil burial abyss that he knew how terrifying it was. Even if he was a peerless third refinement cultivator, if he wasn't careful, he would still die. That was why Zhan Wang's expression changed drastically, and his heart was filled with dread. Could it be that they have all entered the great devil burial abyss? The warlord could not help but think. His thoughts turned, and he immediately understood. Knowing that they could not fight against the imperial court, they entered the great devil burial abyss in an attempt to obtain great opportunities to increase their strength before coming back to fight against the imperial court. After understanding this point, the warlord immediately revealed a cold smile. The great devil burial abyss is extremely terrifying. If it was in the outer region, with your strength as an exceptional second refinement cultivator, you would be able to do whatever you want. However, don't even think about obtaining any great opportunities. If you go deeper, even an exceptional third refinement cultivator would have a high chance of dying. Don't even think about obtaining any opportunities to increase your strength. The deeper one went into the great devil burial abyss, the better the opportunities one could obtain. In the outer region, exceptional second refinement cultivators could do whatever they wanted. However, even if they obtained any opportunities, they would only be ordinary ones. At most, they would be useful for Saint Realm cultivators. It would be difficult for them to obtain first refinement cultivators, let alone second refinement cultivators. No, the warlord frowned as if he was deep in thought. Chu-Mu is a monstrous genius and has great luck. Otherwise, he would not have been able to survive until now under the pursuit of the imperial court and the heavenly clan. Moreover, he is constantly getting stronger. If he obtains a great opportunity in the great devil burial abyss, his strength will increase tremendously. At that time, he will be a great threat. With a thought, the warlord's face became resolute. His eyes were as sharp as swords, piercing through the void. He looked at the dark, desolate region in front of him and turned into a ray of light, quickly entering the dark, desolate region. If he wanted to kill Chu-Mu, the other 5 were nothing. They were like ants that he could easily crush. Only Chu-Mu was the one who made the warlord feel threatened. He had to die. Chu-Mu and the others did not know that the warlord's real body had arrived and had already entered the great devil burial abyss. They were about to cross the outer perimeter of the great devil burial abyss. However, they encountered the first type of danger that Xia Yongxuan had mentioned, the wandering corpses. The wandering corpses were wearing tattered robes. Their skin was greenish-black and looked extremely strange. They were as tough as cowhide and their eyes were pale green. When they moved, there was a slight hesitation, but there was a sense of ferocity that made one's heart palpitate. The eyes of these wandering corpses are light green. They are low-level wandering corpses, but you have to be careful. They are transformed from cultivators who have lost their minds and have been tempered by the baleful Yin Qi for years. Every wandering corpse's body is very strong. Even a saint-level attack would not be able to harm them. Even an attack from a peerless first refinement expert would not be able to cause any obvious damage to them. Moreover, their bodies carry the baleful Yin poison. Once you are scratched by them, the baleful Yin poison will invade your body. Even a peerless second refinement expert would find it difficult to resist, Xia Yongxuan said. As he spoke, the low-level wandering corpses had already rushed over. Their roars were terrifying, and murky liquid flowed out from the corners of their mouths, emitting a strong stench. They were extremely fast and appeared in front of Chu-Mu and the others in the blink of an eye, bringing with them a gust of wind. Feng Wuhin drew his sword. His sword was like a breeze that passed through the gaps and disappeared without a trace. It brushed against the wandering corpses' bodies. Immediately, the wandering corpses froze, and the claws that were reaching for the group stopped in midair. In the next moment, their bodies were torn into pieces. With Feng Wuhin's second refinement strength, even if he did not use his full strength, it was still easy for him to kill the wandering corpses that were only at the first refinement. There were no treasures to be found on the wandering corpses. After killing them, the group ignored them and continued to move forward, going deeper into the great demon burial abyss. However, The great demon burial abyss was dark and gloomy inside. The eviline chi was continuous, and the eviline chi was surrounding it. This greatly reduced the group's speed. Zhan Wang had also entered the great demon burial abyss. However, the direction he entered was slightly different from the direction Chu Mu and the others had entered. In the great demon burial abyss, the evil yin chi was surrounding it, and the aura was severely disturbed. Under such circumstances, Zhan Wang could only rely on luck if he wanted to catch up with Chu Mu and the others. However, his luck did not seem to be very good. The slight difference in direction and the slight deviation caused the distance between him and Chu Mu and the others to increase. Chapter 1950. With a thunderous roar, the lightning shone in all directions, lighting up the area within 100-meter radius. Under the purple lightning, countless corpses could be seen, giving off a strange color. A few wandering corpses trembled under the lightning and let out terrifying howls. A gray aura spread out from their bodies, like smoke. That was the evil yin chi in the wandering corpses. Lightning had always been the nemesis of evil things, especially after refining the Thunderbolt core. Lei Ba's power of lightning was even stronger, causing more damage to the wandering corpses. Of course, even so, the damage that Lei Ba caused to the wandering corpses was still incomparable to that of Feng Wuhen, but close to that of Xia Yongxuan. The strength of a low-level wandering corpse was equivalent to a peerless expert at the middle level of the first refinement, while the strength of a mid-level wandering corpse was comparable to a peerless expert at the peak of the first refinement. As for the high-level wandering corpse, it had the strength of a peerless expert at the beginning or even the middle level of the second refinement. The periphery of the great demon abyss was also the area where the wandering corpses were active. Only after passing through this area could they be considered to have truly entered the great demon abyss. There were almost no opportunities in the periphery of the great demon abyss. Even if there were, they were left behind by those who had entered the great demon abyss and died in the periphery. The cultivators who died in the periphery were usually at the saint level. The most powerful ones were only at the first refinement. As long as they had the strength of the second refinement, even if they could not defeat the high-level wandering corpses, they could still escape. Be careful, we are about to enter the area of the evil spirits. Xia Yongxuan said, the evil spirits are different from the wandering corpses. They are formed by the will of an expert absorbing the evil yin chi. Their form can change freely and they are not afraid of physical attacks. They can also create all kinds of illusions to catch people off guard. Only the power of the will and the power of the heavens and earth can resist and hurt them. The wandering corpses had a strong body, while the evil spirits were formed by the will of an expert absorbing the evil yin chi. They were a spiritual form. Physical attacks could not hurt them at all. Only the will and the power of the heavens and earth could resist them, especially the will. The effect was the most obvious. Following Xia Yongxuan's words, the group did not stop and entered the area of the evil spirits. The outermost part of the great demon burial abyss was the wandering corpse region. Once one entered the great demon burial abyss, it would be the dark spirit region. Only after entering the great demon burial abyss would one enter the great demon burial abyss. The ghost region already had dangers that could kill second refinement masters. Of course, it also had opportunities that could tempt second refinement masters. In the devilish region, even third refinement masters had a high chance of dying. The devilish region was shockingly large, reaching the center of the great devil burial abyss. Therefore, even fifth refinement Saint Venerables could not guarantee their survival if they entered the depths of the great devil burial abyss. However, to Chu Mu and the others, if they wanted to obtain an opportunity that could significantly increase their strength, they had to enter the devil fiend zone. That was the most basic thing they had to do. Cold winds howled, and the baleful yin chi in the yin spirit territory became even more intense. The cold yin chi continued to seep into the bodies of the people, trying to corrode them, but it was expelled by the power of the people. Suddenly, Chu Mu felt a soft murmur in his ear. That voice seemed to come from far away, but also seemed to ring directly in his ear. It was intermittent, but also seemed to be saying something. It also seemed to be calling out to Chu Mu. This voice was soft and gentle, like a gentle breeze, making people feel comfortable. It was as if the surrounding darkness had retreated, and the cold yin qi had dissipated. Instead, it was replaced by light. The light was gentle and warm, making Chu Mu feel comfortable from inside out, even including his origin spirit. In fact, Chu Mu even had the thought of staying here and immersing himself in this comfortable environment. However, just as this thought appeared, Chu Mu's origin spirit and the God-sealing compass in his spiritual world shook at the same time. The two sword souls' sword light shone brightly, and the eternal sword intent spread out, instantly covering every corner of his spiritual world. There seemed to be an incomparably sharp and mournful scream that tore through his eardrums. The light around him immediately dissipated, returning to darkness. The warm and peaceful feeling also disappeared without a trace in an instant, returning to its original cold and gloomy state. The moment the light dissipated, Chu Mu vaguely caught a glimpse of a black shadow from the corner of his eye. It melted like ice and snow, disappearing without a trace. That's the yin spirit, Chu Mu thought to himself. Then he looked around and swept his gaze across the people. Xia Yongxuan also woke up. In the past, he had been to the yin spirit domain and had been attacked by the yin spirits. Since he had experience, he would be able to better defend himself. Seeing that Chu Mu seemed to have woken up earlier than him, Xia Yongxuan was shocked. He had experienced it once, so the moment he stepped into the yin spirit domain, he had been on high alert. This kind of alert was different from Chu Mu and the others. Because Chu Mu and the others hadn't experienced it before, they were only on guard. Xia Yongxuan, on the other hand, could use his own will. Chu Mu had woken up earlier than him. This meant that Chu Mu's will was much stronger than his. Will could be split into many forms. Sword intent was one and faith was another. It wasn't that Xia Yongxuan didn't want to tell Chu Mu and the others what to do. It was just that it was very difficult to explain. He had already told everyone about the dangers of the yin spirits. As for how to defend themselves, they could only rely on their own abilities. Even if others could help once, they couldn't help every time. They had to face it themselves. Feng Wuhan and the others stood motionless, their eyes glazed over. Don't touch them. After being attacked by the yin spirits, they can only rely on their own will to resist, said Xia Yongxuan. What if we can't break free? Asked Chu Mu. If we can't break free, our primordial spirits will become food for the yin spirits and will be devoured. The fragments of our consciousness will absorb the baleful yin qi and become new yin spirits. Xia Yongxuan's voice had a trace of sorrow, as if something like this had happened to him in the past. Shortly after, Xia Yongxuan added, "This is just the beginning of the yin spirit domain. The yin spirits won't be too strong. With their will, they can resist it. The only difference is the length of time." Since that was the case, Chu Mu and Xia Yongxuan could only wait here. Whether they could survive or not depended on whether Feng Wuhan and the others' wills were strong enough to not be confused. As for Chu Mu, who had been attacked by the yin spirits once, the eternal sword will spread out and guarded his spiritual world. Sword will was the ultimate embodiment of the power of will. It was as sharp as a sword and could not be invaded by any evil. The reason why Chu Mu had been attacked by the yin spirits in his spiritual world and had seen illusions was because he had not used his sword will. Of course, it was also because he had not made sufficient preparations despite his vigilance. This was actually Xia Yongxuan's intention. They had just entered the yin spirit domain, so the yin spirits would not be too strong. Therefore, the influence on the will would not be too strong. With everyone's will, they could resist it. As long as they had the experience of resisting it once, they would know how to better resist the yin spirits when they went deeper into the yin spirit domain. After all, Different people often had different ways of doing things. It was their own habits or a kind of specialty. After a few more breaths, Feng Wuhan's eyes moved. They went from being dull to being lively. Obviously, he had resisted the Yin spirit's attack and awakened. Generally, if the Yin spirit's attack failed, it would most likely turn into ashes. A few lucky ones would be able to escape and hide to absorb the Yin Qi to recover their strength. It would often take decades or even longer to recover. After about a dozen more breaths, Kong Lu and Lei Ba woke up one after another. After 3 breaths, Wang Sun woke up. This Yin spirit is really terrifying. It is invisible and impossible to guard against. Lei Ba said with lingering fear. Obviously, he had experienced a very dangerous illusion. Otherwise, he would not be so emotional. Fortunately, the Yin spirit this time does not seem to be strong enough. Wang Sun was also afraid. Among everyone, his strength was the weakest, and his will was also the weakest. However, he could still resist it. Everyone, this is the beginning of the Yin spirit domain. Therefore, the Yin spirits will not be too strong. The deeper you go, the more terrifying the Yin spirits will be. Since everyone has experienced it once, you should know how to better resist the Yin spirit's attack. Xia Yongshuan said, "Even so, you cannot let your guard down. If you are not careful, you may be attacked by the powerful Yin spirits. Your primordial spirit will become food, and your consciousness will become a new Yin spirit." When everyone thought of that terrifying ending, they were shocked. "Let's go. We must enter the devilish region and obtain enough fortuitous encounters to increase our strength. Otherwise, we will not be able to fight against the imperial dynasty. We might as well die here." Kong Lu said, "Indeed, if they did not have enough strength to fight against the imperial dynasty, they would only die. Since they were going to die either way, they might as well enter the devilish region and obtain enough fortuitous encounters to increase their strength. Only then could they fight against the imperial dynasty." Everyone entered the great devil burial abyss this time with the idea of facing death and fighting to survive. Naturally, they would not be afraid of the slightest thing. They continued to enter deeper into the Yin spirit domain. Very quickly, more Yin spirits appeared and attacked silently. However, everyone had experienced it once before. Therefore, they were already prepared. They reacted immediately and fought against it. Chu Mu's eternal sword intent guarded the spiritual world. It was incomparably high-end, like a god standing above the clouds. As soon as the Yin spirits attacked and entered the spiritual world, they were suppressed by the eternal sword intent. They could not affect Chu Mu at all. Under the terrifying power of the eternal sword intent, they were destroyed and turned into ashes. Only a sharp scream was heard. In less than a breath, the Yin spirit that attacked Chu Mu was finished. As for the others, although they were on guard, their willpower was much weaker than Chu Mu's. Therefore, it took them 2 to 3 breaths of time to break free of the Yin spirit's attack, and they didn't manage to kill all of them. Forward, forward, forward. The 6 of them continued to move forward. The deeper they went into the Yin spirit domain, the stronger the Yin spirits they encountered. Even Chu Mu was affected and could not kill them within a breath. It even took him 2 breaths. If Chu Mu was like this, then the others would be even worse. Chapter 1951. Mere nether spirits, how dare you try to affect me? Break! With a low roar, the Battle King's eyes shone brightly. His shocking battle intent seemed to be able to shatter the sky. However, the battle intent disappeared in a flash. It was as swift as a white steed flitting through a crack, instantly shattering the nether spirits that were attacking him. A 3rd refinement Battle King was extremely terrifying. His battle intent was earth-shattering, and he could at most affect the spirits of 2nd refinement cultivators. In his eyes, they were nothing more than ants. What he was truly afraid of was the demonic fiend. There were strong and weak devilish spirits. The weak ones were at most equivalent to a 1st refinement expert. The strong ones could even be compared to a sacred venerable. If one was unlucky and encountered a terrifying devilish spirit that was comparable to a fourth refinement expert or even a sacred venerable, they would most likely die. Thus, the Battle King's path through the Een spirit region was unimpeded. However, he wasn't the least bit happy because his target was Chu Mu. However, after Chu Mu and the others entered the great devil burial abyss, it was as if they had entered the ocean. They disappeared without a trace, and there was no way to find them. The disturbance of their auras was too severe, and there was no way to determine their whereabouts. That was close. I almost couldn't wake up. Wang's son recovered from his daze. His eyes subconsciously darted around as he spoke in a fearful tone. His face was pale. Among the 6 of them, Wang's son's cultivation was at the intermediate second refinement. His strength was enough to threaten or even kill an advanced second refinement expert. However, his will was still weaker than an advanced second refinement expert. He was weaker than Lei Ba, weaker than Kong Lu, and weaker than Xia Yongxuan and Feng Wuhan. Among the 6 of them, his will was the weakest. In the nether spirit region, the only way to fight against the nether spirits was through one's will. As they went deeper, they reached the end of the nether spirit region. If they went any further, they would enter the devilish region. This was the last wave of nether spirits that they would be attacked by. Chu Mu naturally passed through it the easiest. Under his eternal sword will, the nether spirits did not even have the ability to struggle and were directly killed. Feng Wuhan's will was strong, and so was Xia Yongxuan's. Next was Kong Lu. Lei Ba was slightly weaker than Kong Lu, but not by much. Lastly was Wang Sunday. Everyone made it through the last wave of Een spirits. Wang's son was the last one, and it was very dangerous. It was as if he was walking on a tightrope, and below him was an endless abyss. If he fell, he would be smashed to pieces. "Let's rest for a bit and adjust our energy before we enter the Devil Fiend region," said Xia Yongxuan. His tone was serious as he stared ahead at the completely different darkness. Back then, he had obtained a fortuitous encounter in the nether spirit region, and had not yet stepped into the fiendish devil region. Even so, he had a 90% chance of dying. Thus, he was extremely wary of the fiendish devil region. Everyone also understood that the devilish land was the true location of the great devil burial abyss. It is said that in the devil fiend territory, as long as one can defeat and kill the devil fiends, there's a chance of obtaining a fortuitous encounter. Xia Yongxuan added, causing everyone's eyes to light up. After adjusting his breathing, Chu Mu was the first to recover because he had consumed the least energy. Wang's son was the slowest to recover because he had consumed the most willpower. After everyone had recovered, their essence, energy, and spirit had all reached their peak. Their eyes shone brightly as they stared ahead. "Go," Xia Yongxuan said in a low voice. He took large strides forward, stepping out of the nether spirit region and into the fiendish devil region. The instant they entered the fiendish devil region, Chu Mu felt his body involuntarily tremble. It was as if the surrounding pressure had suddenly increased by a lot. The fiendish Yin Qi had become even denser, and some unknown changes had also occurred. Sword origin circulated throughout his body, and his blood Qi surged, blocking all the fiendish Yin Qi that attempted to invade his body. The others also had their own methods to resist the invasion of the fiendish Yin Qi. After entering the fiendish devil region, everyone's speed dropped once more. Apart from the sound of their own footsteps, they couldn't even hear the sound of their breathing. It was completely silent. The range of their vision had also been greatly reduced. They could only see about 500 meters in front of them. Anything further was a blur, and even further was darkness. In this kind of place, no one dared to release their spiritual strength, because to the fiendish devil and the others, spiritual strength was like delicious food that would excite them. The light in the fiendish devil region was even dimmer, and the terrain was even more chaotic. Deep pits, huge holes, collapsed walls, and broken pillars could be seen everywhere. It was like a ruin in an abyss. These were actually the remains of the many buildings in the two large regions that had been destroyed by a powerful force back then. What a strong aura! Among the 6 people, Chu Mu's perception was the sharpest. Therefore, as soon as he sensed the change in the aura, he warned in a low voice. His voice was like a silk thread that entered everyone's ears. It didn't spread out, nor did he use his spiritual strength or sword origin. He simply controlled his own strength and consciously transmitted his voice through the air, showing Chu Mu's amazing control over his own strength. Everyone tried their best to restrain their auras as they stealthily moved forward. Through a half-collapsed wall, they saw a figure a few hundred meters away. That figure was pitch black and emitted an incomparably shocking, baleful aura. That kind of aura had a hint of baleful aura, but it was 10 times denser than the baleful aura. Moreover, it had a demonic nature, a fiendish devil. Everyone's eyes flashed. If there was a fiendish devil, it meant that they could obtain an opportunity. This fiendish devil's aura fluctuation is second refinement, Feng Wuhan said. The peak of second refinement. Chu Mu said more accurately because his perception was the sharpest. With our strength, we can definitely kill a fiendish devil that is at the peak of second refinement. Everyone was very confident. However, to ensure that nothing went wrong, they still decided to launch a sudden attack and kill it directly. In the fiendish devil zone, it was best not to fight for too long because the energy fluctuations during the battle would spread out and affect other fiendish devils, attracting them over. Once there were too many fiendish devils, the few of them would definitely be at a disadvantage. If the fiendish devils that were attracted over were too strong, it was unknown whether they could survive. Therefore, in the fiendish devil zone, they must not have any thoughts of practicing. Either they didn't attack at all, or once they attacked, they had to be swift and decisive to kill the target. They had to try their best to shorten the battle time and reduce the range of the energy fluctuations. Why don't we have Chu Mu attack? Xia Yongxuan and I will support. Airflow will do our best to reduce the range of the energy fluctuations, Feng Wuhan said. When airflow's way of space was used, it could cleverly isolate the energy fluctuations within a certain range, preventing them from spreading out and affecting a distance and attracting other fiendish devils. Among the 6 of them, Chu Mu was the strongest. Even without using a secret technique, his strength was slightly superior to Feng Wuhan's. Therefore, it was only natural for him to be the main force. As for Feng Wuhan and Xia Yongxuan, they would cooperate with him to prevent any unexpected changes. At that moment, Chu Mu's Annihilation Spirit Sword had not been completed. The Silver Spirit Sword could not withstand the power of the Annihilation Sword will, but the Eternal Spirit Sword could completely withstand it. However, the power of Annihilation and the power of Eternity were like 2 opposing forces. If he used the Eternal Spirit Sword to use the Eternal Sword will, it would be strengthened. If he used the Eternal Spirit Sword to use the Annihilation Sword will, the 2 forces would affect each other and weaken each other. Therefore, Chu Mu attacked with the Eternal Sword will. Silently in the darkness, clouds spread out silently, covering a radius of a few hundred meters. It also quickly spread to the peak second, refining fiendish devil's body. Immediately he attacked with his sword. With the help of the Eternal Spiritual Sword, the power of the Eternal Sword will was amplified. All the power in his body was controlled by the Eternal Sword will. It was condensed into an extremely condensed sword light. It silently pierced through the clouds and mist and pierced forward. In an instant, Chu Mu's sword pierced towards the fiendish devil. Chu Mu and the others did not know much about the fiendish devil. Even Xia Yongxuan, who had entered the great demon burial abyss before, did not know what abilities the fiendish devil had. The moment Chu Mu attacked, Feng Wuhan and Xia Yongxuan also attacked. One on the left and the other on the right, like protectors. Under the wave of Kong Lu's hands, power quietly spread out, sealing off the surroundings as much as possible. With the Eternal Spirit Sword in hand, Chu Mu's strength was at the middle stage of the second refining. When he used the eternal sword will, his attack power had completely reached the level of a half step to the third refining. It was only a little different from before, when he could not use the sword will but used all kinds of secret techniques. The attack power of a half step to the third refining was already enough to deal with the peak second refining fiendish devil. If he used the power of the sword domain change, it would cause an even greater fluctuation. Unexpectedly, the fiendish devil's reaction was unexpectedly fast. The moment Chu Mu's sword pierced it, it had already reacted. A strangely twisted face was filled with pain and ferocity. Its pitch-black body seemed to have countless broken faces. They all opened their mouths at Chu Mu and let out silent roars. An indescribable, formless fiendish chi instantly rushed over, attempting to erode Chu Mu's spiritual will. Immediately after, the fiendish devil attacked. Its pitch-black claws tore through the void and viciously clawed at Chu Mu. Attacking one's spiritual will and body was the fiendish devil's ability. It was like the combination of a wandering corpse and another spirit. On top of that, it had been enhanced and strengthened, making it even more terrifying. Almost everyone who saw the fiendish devil's true appearance would be shocked. Chu Mu was no exception. However, he was not affected. The fiendish devil was at the peak of the second refining. Its terrifying fiendish chi attack was enough to affect a strong person at the peak of the second refining. However, to Chu Mu, who had the eternal sword will, it was not a threat. He easily blocked it. The sword that stabbed out was the cloud-piercing sword form. It was not affected at all. In an instant, it pierced through the fiendish devil's pitch-black claws and shattered them. Then, it pierced through the fiendish devil's body. A terrifying power instantly spread out and covered the fiendish devil's body. Chapter 1952. Spreading his power all over the devil fiend's body was Chu Mu's precaution because he wasn't sure where the devil fiend's weak point was. Even if he pierced through the devil fiend's body, he might not be able to cause fatal damage. The eternal spiritual sword pierced through the demon fiend's body, and a terrifying energy instantly spread out like a spiderweb, covering the demon fiend's body. All of the devil fiend's movements stopped in an instant. His distorted face and the countless shattered faces on his body also revealed an expression of extreme terror at that moment. With a bang, it was as if smoke had exploded. The pitch-black demon fiend's body instantly shattered. Throughout the entire process, Feng Wuhen and Xia Yongxuan didn't have the chance to make a move. This was the best outcome. The demon fiend died and dissipated. A pitch-black crystal fell to the ground. Chu Mu lightly flicked his sword, and the black crystal was lifted up. His palm, which was covered with dense sword energy, grabbed the crystal. It was an irregular crystal the size of a duck's egg. Its entire body was pitch black like a black crystal. Within it, there seemed to be traces of black energy flowing. Our luck isn't bad. We got something the moment we made a move. Lei Ba glanced at the black crystal and said, "But what is this?" "Maybe it's a treasure." Wang Sun glanced at it and said, "Maybe it's an inheritance." "Let me check it with my will." Chu Mu said, "Among everyone, his will was the most suitable. Moreover, the demon fiend died under his sword. It was only natural for Chu Mu to check it. When his will touched the black crystal, it instantly seeped into it. Instantly, Chu Mu only felt his will spinning unceasingly, as if it was rising and falling in a black river. When it stopped, he seemed to hear war cries in his ears. Terrifying energy fluctuations flowed in all directions. Each of them contained a shocking might that could easily tear apart the earth and shatter the sky. The slightest touch would turn him into ashes. Smoke rose in all directions. Countless streams of light shuttled back and forth. It was chaos. A peerless sword cultivator slashed out with his sword light. The sword light seemed to pierce through time and space, splitting the heavens and earth. A tall figure suddenly struck out with a palm that covered half the sky. As the palm descended, countless people died. They were reduced to pieces of flesh and blood, and the ground collapsed. A finger pierced through the sky and pressed down. That was a gigantic thumb. With a light press, a mountain instantly crumbled into dust. That gigantic finger contained an incomparably terrifying might as it pressed down on a figure on the ground. That figure didn't look very strong, but it contained an indescribable might as it lifted its head and stared at the sky. Chu Mu could not clearly see the figure's appearance, but he could see that the figure's eyes were extremely sharp, like a divine sword that pierced through the void. Soon after, an explosive roar sounded as an incomparably terrifying power erupted from his body. With a loud bang, that figure soared into the sky. The ground beneath his feet shattered as he threw out a punch. The punch was like a dragon emerging from the sea as it soared into the sky and smashed towards the huge thumb that was pressing down. When the thumb shattered, that figure instantly trembled. He instantly turned around and looked in the direction of Chu Mu. His eyes instantly emitted a shocking light that pierced through the void and shot into Chu Mu's eyes. Chu Mu only felt his will tremble as if he was struck by lightning. The darkness in front of him reversed as he exited the black crystal. Faint cracking sounds rang out from the crystal, but everyone could clearly hear them. Traces of cracks appeared on the black crystal, and it turned into dust. His consciousness was dark and chaotic, but Chu Mu's will was extremely strong. He quickly adjusted and recovered his consciousness. It seemed that many years had passed, but in reality it was only an instant. Chu Mu felt that there was something new in his mind. How is it? Feng Wuhen looked at Chu Mu and asked, "There are gains, but I need to straighten them out first." Chu Mu said. His face suddenly revealed a look of surprise, which then turned into joy. Seeing the change in Chu Mu's expression, everyone became excited. This meant that the gains were definitely good, a kind of cultivation technique. Chu Mu looked at everyone and said, "Cultivation technique?" Everyone frowned slightly. What they needed the most was not some cultivation method, because they already had their own cultivation method, and it was impossible for them to change it. After all, it was not easy for them to change their cultivation method. Moreover, the cultivation method that they were cultivating was not bad. This cultivation technique is a special kind of cultivation technique. All of us can cultivate it. Once we master it, our strength will definitely increase significantly. Chu Mu said. His eyes flashed with a sharp light. This special cultivation technique is called the demonic spirit body. It is a secret cultivation technique of the ancient demon path. It casts the saint body into a demonic spirit body, and its power is amazing. Demonic spirit body, everyone repeated. They all stared at Chu Mu, hoping that Chu Mu could explain in more detail. Brothers, you all know that cultivators of the saint body Tao can achieve a spiritual body. However, it's very difficult to achieve a spiritual body. The ancient demon Tao used a special method to cast a spiritual body. It's different from a real spiritual body. It's divided into low level, middle level, and high level. The highest level can only be cultivated to the third level. However, the power of the low-level demon spiritual body is much stronger than the power of the first-level demon spiritual body. Chu Mu said. He told everyone all the information he had obtained about the demonic spirit body. What I have obtained is only the casting method of the low-level demonic spirit body. Through a special method, it absorbs the power of the demon path and merges it into the body, transforming it into a demonic spirit body. Are there any flaws? Wang Sun asked. Obviously, he was very tempted. Not only him, but the others were also tempted. It should be known that they were not saint body path cultivators, nor did they have that kind of talent. Therefore, their saint body was still at the middle level. If they could cultivate a demonic spirit body, even if it was only a low-level demonic spirit body, it would not be inferior to a real spirit body. Then, their survivability would be greatly improved. After all, the defensive power of the demonic spirit body was certainly countless times better than their current saint body. The gap between the two was unimaginably huge. Therefore, if they could cultivate a demonic spirit body, their overall strength would be improved. At that time, there would be no problem for them to improve by a small level. If they could obtain the cultivation method of the middle-level demonic spirit body and cultivate it successfully, the demonic spirit body alone would be comparable to a peerless expert of the second level. Their strength would be even more powerful. It was estimated that they could compete with an ordinary, peerless expert of the third level. If they could cultivate a high-level demonic spirit body, then it would not be a problem to fight with a peerless expert of the third level. In an instant, everyone saw hope. However, the power of the demonic spirit body was so great that it must have some side effects. They had to figure it out. The first flaw is that its potential is limited. The highest level it can be cultivated to is the high level, comparable to the third level of the spirit body. The second flaw is that it is not a real spirit body. In terms of self-healing ability, it is only 1/10 of a real spirit body. The third flaw is that the demonic spirit body absorbs the power of the demonic way to cultivate. Over time, it may affect the person's temperament to a certain extent, making them more warlike and even bloodthirsty. Chu-Mu said, "But if one's will is strong enough, it can be very good to resist the third flaw of the demonic spirit body. Cultivate, I want to cultivate. Please teach me the cultivation method of the demonic spirit body." Wang Sun immediately said, "Compared to the improvement of one's strength, the three so-called flaws were so insignificant. The first and second flaws could not even be regarded as flaws. After all, the cultivation of the path of the divine body required the corresponding talent and a lot of resources. For example, the few of them were all peerless experts of the second refinement, but their divine bodies were only at the intermediate level. Even if they were to upgrade to the third refinement, at best, their divine bodies would reach the 7th level. Not only them, but the vast majority of cultivators were the same. On the other hand, the demon spirit body used a special method to cultivate the saint body into a demon spirit body. Although it was not a real spirit body, and its potential and self-healing ability could not be compared to a real spirit body, it was still many times stronger than a saint body. In that case, why not cultivate it? As for the so-called third flaw, it was completely acceptable. The greater the risk, the greater the benefit. It was normal. I want to cultivate it too. Everyone expressed their opinions. Chu-Mu did not hesitate and directly taught the cultivation method of the low-level demonic spirit body to everyone. In fact, for everyone, the effect of the demonic spirit body was the greatest for Chu-Mu, because Chu-Mu had the technique of combining his physical strength and the power of the sword origin to form a more powerful force. His current divine body was at the peak of the 9th level. If he could cultivate the low-level demonic spirit body, it would be equivalent to having the power of the first refinement of the divine body, or even more powerful. It would definitely skyrocket. When that time came, his strength would definitely be significantly improved. Now that the demonic way has declined or even disappeared, where is the power of the demonic way? Leiba frowned. Maybe we can't cultivate the demonic spirit body outside, but there's hope in the great demon burial abyss. Feng Wuhen's eyes flashed with wisdom. This demonic qi, to a certain extent, can be regarded as a kind of power of the demonic way. Whether it is or not, we'll know after trying to cultivate it. Chu-Mu said, and directly operated the cultivation method of the demonic spirit body. His comprehension was amazing, and he had directly received the inheritance. Therefore, he had already comprehended the cultivation method of the demonic spirit body and could cultivate it. As soon as the cultivation method was operated, a strange power suddenly flowed between Chu-Mu's bones and muscles, creating a suction force. The demonic qi around was immediately absorbed and integrated into Chu-Mu's body. As the suction force circulated, Chu-Mu immediately felt a very strange feeling coming from his muscles and bones. It was a little numb and itchy, but also a little cold, stinging pain, as if he was being pricked by ice needles. Vaguely, he also keenly felt that his divine body seemed to be undergoing some kind of change, an unexpected change. Chapter 1953. The Great Devil Burial Abyss was dark and deep. It was filled with countless evil chi and illusions, as if ghosts were wandering in the night. The indistinct, mournful whimpers were constantly heard, making one's hair stand on end. The warlord stepped into the evil chi with a serious expression. He had to be careful in this place. The records of the imperial court regarding the Great Devil Burial Abyss were very detailed. As one of the 10 lords of the imperial court, the warlord naturally had the authority to look into the Great Devil Burial Abyss. Unfortunately, he didn't study it in depth, so he only knew a little about the Great Devil Burial Abyss. However, he knew how terrifying it was. He tried his best to conceal his aura to avoid attracting the evil chi as he walked forward slowly. At this time, the warlord didn't dare to rush to find Chumu and the others. He had to protect himself first. Soon, an evil chi appeared in the warlord's sight. The warlord's eyes flashed as he approached slowly. Then he unleashed a powerful attack, shattering the void with a finger. The evil chi gathered from all directions and rushed into Chumu's body. Chumu felt as if his blood was about to freeze and his limbs were numb. It was as if he was in an extremely cold place. Under the demonic spirit body's cultivation method, this numbing feeling was gradually alleviated. However, the evil chi in the Great Devil Burial Abyss was not only rich, but also of high quality and incomparably pure. The power it contained was shocking. A trace of the evil chi was enough to freeze the chi and blood of a 9-star saint cultivator instantly. Their limbs would go numb, and even their spiritual world would be frozen, and their vitality would be extinguished. Chu Mu's saintly body had reached the peak of the 9th level. His chi and blood were pure yang. He was strong and had enough resistance. Even so, he felt waves of discomfort. He had to fully activate the demonic spirit body's cultivation method to alleviate some of it. Feng Wuhen and the other 4 watched in horror. When the baleful yin chi flowed past them, they felt a chill run down their spines. Chu Mu's entire body was surrounded by a dense, baleful yin chi. Only a blurry figure could be seen. In his ears, there seemed to be countless howls of agony. In front of him, there seemed to be distorted faces and pale white hands reaching out from the depths of hell, grabbing at Chumu, attempting to grab Chumu and drag Chumu into the depths of hell. This was an illusion. Because the baleful yin chi was too dense, the illusion would affect the cultivator's spiritual will. If the cultivator's spiritual will was not strong enough, they would sink into the illusion. Their consciousness would be pulled and they would fall into darkness. Fearing that it would cause too much of a commotion, Chumu dared not continue cultivating. He stopped absorbing the baleful yin energy and circulated his energy to disperse the baleful yin energy that had gathered around him. How is it? Everyone hurriedly asked. Baleful yin chi can be absorbed, but the effect is ordinary. Moreover, it is extremely dangerous. Chumu said, the baleful yin chi will cause damage to the body and will attack the spiritual will, triggering layers of illusions. If you are not careful, you may end up with a damaged body and spiritual will. Hearing Chumu's words, everyone's face suddenly changed. Absorbing the baleful yin chi to cultivate the demonic spirit body had an ordinary effect. In this place, there was no lack of baleful yin chi. If one could absorb more, they could always cultivate it. However, the baleful yin chi would damage the body and attack the spiritual will, which made them very wary. Moreover, this was the great demon abyss. If the baleful yin chi was absorbed too loudly, it was very likely that it would attract a lot of demonic spirits and put them in danger. In that case, wouldn't it be a bit useless to obtain the demonic spirit body cultivation method? Everyone, when the demonic spirits dissipate, would the effect be better than the baleful yin chi? Kong Lu seemed to have thought of something. His eyes lit up as he asked, We can try. Chu Mu recalled that when the demonic spirits were killed by his sword and dissipated, the baleful yin qi that dissipated seemed to be quite pure. However, he did not pay much attention to it at that time, so he was not clear about it. However, as long as he killed another demonic spirit, he would know. Everyone suddenly became more motivated. Not long after, they found the second demonic spirit. The demonic aura within the demonic aura region could be said to be endless. There were extremely few experts who dared to enter the demonic aura region. Hence, even after countless years had passed since the ancient times, the number of demonic aura within the demonic aura region had not decreased. Fortunately, the strength of the second demonic spirit was also at the peak of the second refinement. This time, Chu Mu took the lead again, while Feng Wuhen and Xia Yongxuan supported him. Kong Lu tried his best to limit the range of the fluctuation of the aura. With one strike, Chu Mu, who had experienced it before, easily killed the peak of the second refinement demonic spirit. The demonic spirit's body dissipated, turning into wisps of qi that spread out. In just a few breaths, it dissipated into nothingness and merged into the demonic yin qi that was everywhere. Chu Mu was already prepared. The moment the demonic spirit's body dissipated, he activated the demon's spirit body technique and absorbed the dissipating demonic spirit's qi. The qi was attracted and rushed towards Chu Mu, being absorbed by Chu Mu's body. His body trembled involuntarily, and his qi and blood seemed to be frozen. His limbs were slightly numb. But compared to when he had absorbed the demonic yin qi previously, the numbness was reduced by more than half, and his mental will was slightly affected. Soon, Chu Mu absorbed and refined the dissipating demonic spirit's qi. Wisps of gray qi were expelled from the pores of his body, carrying an indescribable stench. It was the dregs, and the essence had been absorbed by Chu Mu. The ratio of dregs to essence was about 100:1. It was quite low, but the effect was not bad. It was a pity that the demonic spirit did not leave anything behind. The effect is more than 10 times better than the demonic yin qi, and the side effects are less than half of the demonic yin qi. After Chu Mu had absorbed and refined the demonic yin qi, he told everyone. This was good news, and everyone was overjoyed. Then, how much demonic spirit's qi do we need to absorb to cultivate the demon's spirit body? Wang Sun asked. Among everyone, he was the weakest, so he was the most eager to improve his strength. Chu Mu pondered for a moment, then said, with my peak level 9 sacred body, to cultivate the demon's spirit body, I need to absorb at least 50 peak of the second refinement demonic spirit's qi. Only 50. There are many demonic spirits in the demonic territory. Everyone smiled when they heard this. 50 demonic spirits sounded like a lot, but the demonic spirits were the most abundant in the demonic territory. Brothers, your sacred bodies have not reached the peak level 9. So, to cultivate the demon spirit body, you need to absorb more than 50 demonic spirits. Chu Mu pondered for a moment, then said, moreover, only 1% of the demonic spirit's qi is effective. The remaining 99% is dregs, which will harm the sacred body. So, it's best for you to absorb the demonic spirit's qi at the beginning. 5 of you should absorb it together to refine your sacred body and raise it to the peak level 9 first. Okay, everyone nodded. Their sacred bodies were indeed not strong enough, and they were far from the peak level 9. Chu Mu's words were reasonable, and it was safer. Next, everyone's goal became clearer. Demonic spirits often existed alone, and they had their own area. The stronger the demonic spirit, the larger the area. When they encountered a demonic spirit, the others would kill it, and then use the demon's spirit body technique to absorb it together. The demonic spirit's qi was divided into 5 parts, which were absorbed and refined by 5 people. Although only 1/5 of the essence was absorbed, only 1/5 of the dregs were absorbed. Their sacred bodies could barely bear it. After absorbing it a few times, their sacred bodies were strengthened, and they could really bear it. If it was a second refining demonic spirit, Chu Mu would absorb the demonic spirit's qi after it was killed. After every absorption and refinement, Chu Mu could feel that his sacred body seemed to be strengthened. However, the strengthening effect was not obvious because it was a transition from a sacred body to a demon spirit body. It was a kind of transformation, a kind of breakthrough. He had to accumulate enough power to break through the bottleneck and become a demon spirit body. The situation was different for the other 5 people. Their sacred bodies were only at the intermediate level, and they had to raise it to the peak level 9 before they could truly form a demon spirit body. So, every time they absorbed and refined the demonic spirit's qi, they would feel an obvious strengthening. The continuous strengthening of their sacred bodies made them very happy. However, the depressing thing was that after killing more than a dozen demonic spirits, they did not gain anything other than the demonic spirit's qi. That is a third refining demonic spirit. Let's go. Chu Mu whispered to them. A third refining demonic spirit, even if it was only at the initial stage of the third refining, was not easy to kill with their strength. Moreover, a third refining demonic spirit's qi was very terrifying, and Chu Mu was not confident that he could absorb it. In that case, he would not kill it for the time being. A third refining demonic spirit senses were much stronger than a second refining demonic spirit. Chu Mu did not dare to make any noise. Otherwise, he would have to fight if he was discovered. Fortunately, he was cautious enough to leave the area of the third refining demonic spirit. As time passed, Chu Mu and the other 5 people continued to kill demonic spirits. In addition to the demonic spirit's qi, they also gained some other things. However, they could not be compared to a demon spirit body, and were not of much help to improve their strength. What a terrifying qi! It has definitely surpassed the third refining. Chu Mu stopped in his tracks. That terrifying qi made him realize that there was an extremely powerful demonic spirit in the area ahead. It had surpassed the third refining demonic spirit. Perhaps they would be discovered as soon as they stepped into that area. They might not even have a chance to escape. If it were not for Chu Mu's extremely sharp senses, they might have stepped into that area. At that time, it would be hard to say whether they would be dead or alive. They were all afraid and glad that they were traveling with Chu Mu. They continued to search for and kill demonic spirits. Brothers, I feel that my demon spirit body is about to be completed. I just need to kill 2 more second refining demonic spirits, and I will definitely be able to break through. Chu Mu said, revealing a piece of news that made everyone happy. This is a good event where a pie falls from the sky. Cool phones are waiting for you. Follow, click on the Chinese website's official account, add a friend on WeChat, add a public account, type Dread, and participate immediately. There will be prizes for everyone. Follow Dread's official account on WeChat. Chapter 1954. His finger seemed to shatter the heavens. The terrifying power caused the peak second refining demonic fiend to disintegrate. Its aura dissipated, leaving behind a pitch-black irregular crystal. Zhan Wang reached out and grabbed the pitch-black crystal in his hand. His mind entered it, and his face changed. After 10 breaths, Zhan Wang's expression returned to normal. However, there was a look of regret in his eyes. The demonic spirit body is indeed a very good, special cultivation technique. If I can master it, my strength will increase again. Unfortunately, I lack a low-level demonic spirit body. I can't master it at all, Zhan Wang said to himself. Although he was a peerless elite at the peak of the third refining, he didn't have much talent in the path of the divine body. Therefore, he had spent a lot of resources to reach the peak of the 9th level. However, he still couldn't form a demonic spirit body. To form a demonic spirit body, resources alone weren't enough. Unless it was a special elixir from ancient times, it would be possible to form a demonic spirit body directly. Zhan Wang naturally wanted to have a powerful demonic spirit body. However, he couldn't achieve it. This was one of his regrets. The demonic spirit body wasn't considered a demonic spirit body, but it was more powerful than a demonic spirit body. This made him eager to obtain the low-level demonic spirit body cultivation technique. That way, he would have a chance to cultivate the low-level and mid-level demonic spirit body. If he could obtain the high-level demonic spirit body cultivation technique, once he mastered it, his strength would definitely increase. Perhaps reaching the half step to fourth refining or even the real fourth refining would be a cinch. If he could capture Chumu alive and force him to reveal the secret technique, his trump card would be even more powerful. When the time came, his strength would be even more terrifying. Zhan Wang's heart couldn't help but burn at the thought of this. If I absorb another second refining demonic fiend, my demonic spirit body will be complete. Chumu thought to himself. He was slightly excited. The energy in his body had already reached a limit. If he absorbed more, he would break through this limit and reach a whole new level. He was excited, and so were the other 5. Soon, Chumu discovered another demonic specter. It had the strength of a peak second refinement. It was still Chumu's turn to attack, while Feng Wuhen and Xia Yongxuan acted as backup, using the airflow to limit the fluctuation of the aura. Lei Ba and Wang Sun were not idle either. They had to be vigilant of their surroundings. After all, this was the great devil burial abyss, and accidents could happen at any time. The devil fiends each had their own territory. However, if they were attracted, they would leave their own territory and enter other territories to join forces against the enemy. If there were no external enemies, the devil fiends would enter other areas and kill each other, devouring each other to strengthen themselves. Chumu made his move and killed the peak second refining devil fiend with one strike. Under his sword, there wasn't much difference between a peak second refining devil fiend and a peak second refining devil fiend. Using the demonic spirit body cultivation method, he immediately absorbed all of the demonic chi that had dissipated. Something also fell from the absorbed demonic chi. A large amount of gray chi was expelled from Chumu's pores. The remaining 1% of the essence was absorbed, refined, and accumulated by Chumu. Rumbling sounds rang out in Chumu's body. A wave of power was like a flood dragon emerging from the abyss, quickly swimming through every part of his body. Everywhere it passed, Chumu could feel that his bones and muscles were being strengthened at an indescribable speed, becoming more and more powerful. When the flood dragon finished swimming through his body, it was also exhausted. Chumu's divine body also underwent a fundamental change. Between his bones, muscles, and even his organs, everything had changed. A new kind of power had been integrated into them. That was the power of the demonic way. Chumu felt that the power contained in his body was several times stronger than before. However, the spirit body was more than 10 times stronger than the divine body. Therefore, this was definitely not the true power of the demonic spirit body. The change was not completely over yet. That wave of power, like a flash flood, rushed out from the depths of his body. Chumu's body also expanded in an instant, like an inflated balloon. The blue veins under the blood shark armor protruded one by one, looking very terrifying. Powerful fluctuations of aura continued to spread out from his body, like a storm sweeping through. Everyone surrounded him, vigilantly watching Chumu's changes carefully. After 10 breaths, Chumu's body expanded to the limit, as if it was about to explode. Immediately it began to shrink, but in the end it did not shrink back to its original size. Compared to before, it seemed to be a little stronger. Chumu could also clearly feel that the muscles on his body had become stronger, but it was just right, not affecting the flexibility of his body. An unimaginably powerful power was hidden in his body, lurking between his bones and muscles. As long as he wanted to, it could erupt at any time. This power was more than 10 times stronger than the previous peak 9th level divine body. Chumu did not know how powerful the power of a spiritual body was, but he was confident that the power he possessed now was definitely not inferior to a spiritual body. With a slight thought, the power in his body began to move like a surging tide, instantly covering his entire body. There was a feeling of tension in his muscles, filled with a terrifying, explosive power. Traces of battle intent rose from Chu Mu's heart. That battle intent was not the battle intent that Chu Mu possessed himself, but it was brought about by the demonic spirit body. It was a side effect of the demonic spirit body, but it could not affect Chu Mu. With his powerful will, he could completely suppress the battle intent without any interference. However, Chu Mu did not do so. The battle intent, within a range that could be controlled, was also useful to him. The life force in his body did not increase by much. The life force of the demonic spirit body was only 1/10 of a true spiritual body. Chu Mu's life force was originally very powerful, far surpassing the peak 9th level divine body. It was almost half of a true spiritual body. With the superposition, it increased a little, but it still could not be compared to a true spiritual body. However, according to the introduction of the demonic spirit body cultivation technique, the life force was one of the flaws, while the battle intent and other effects were another. However, in terms of power, it was slightly stronger than a true spiritual body of the same level. Overall, there were advantages and disadvantages. With a thought, the power immediately calmed down. Chu Mu could still feel the powerful energy, fluctuations, filling his body. "Brothers, I have successfully cultivated the demonic spirit body," said Chu Mu. "That's great. How do you feel?" Everyone immediately asked with joy. "It's very powerful." Chu Mu said seriously, "With my strength, even if I don't use a secret technique or sword intent, I can still contend with a peak advanced second refining." When everyone heard this, their hearts trembled, and they revealed expressions of ecstasy and excitement. Without using a secret technique or sword intent, Chu Mu's strength was equivalent to someone who had just entered the intermediate second refining. Now that he had cultivated the demonic spirit body, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. It was not just one small level, but 2 small levels. From the intermediate second refining to the advanced second refining, he had reached the peak of the advanced second refining. In other words, without using a secret technique, Chu Mu's strength could barely reach the beginner third refining with just sword intent. Good. Next, it's our turn to cultivate the demonic spirit body, everyone said. "Brothers, I have cultivated the demonic spirit body, and my strength has increased so much. Other than the strength of the demonic spirit body itself, it is also related to a technique." Chu Mu said, "This technique was comprehended by me in the land of exile. I named it the energy fusion technique. It is to perfectly combine one's yuan, li, and physical strength to maximize it." Everyone was not stupid. When they heard Chu Mu's words, their eyes lit up. Originally, even if they had cultivated the demonic spirit body, their greatest advantage would be their tyrannical bodies. They would be faster in battle, and their strength would be stronger. Most importantly, their defense would increase, which would increase their survivability. However, they would not be able to fully unleash the power of the demonic spirit body. After all, the demonic spirit body was only at the beginner level. It was equivalent to the first refining, and their strength had already reached the second refining. They could not give up their second refining strength and use their first refining strength. It could only be used as a support. Chu Mu's energy fusion technique could fully unleash the demonic spirit body's support effect. However, the energy fusion technique was not easy to master. It required everyone to put in effort and a considerable amount of time. "Chu Mu is indeed our lucky star," Feng Wuhan said with a smile. He was very happy. Ever since he had agreed to form an alliance with everyone, his strength had been constantly increasing. The demonic spirit that had been killed had left behind a pitch-black sword. It was a demonic sword. Rather than calling it a demonic sword, it was more like a slightly longer dagger. It was very thin but very sharp. The pitch-black blade was thin, and the edge of the blade was densely serrated. It looked very terrifying. It was a killing weapon. On the hilt, there were 2 ancient words engraved, "Slaughter Blood." This demonic sword belonged to Wang Sunday. Among everyone, he was the only one who used a short sword. Good sword. It is more than 30% sharper than my invisible sword. Wang Sun was very happy after testing it. With a more powerful weapon, he could also increase his strength. I believe that our gains will only increase. If we continue, I am confident that I can fight against a 3rd refining expert. Suddenly, everyone was full of confidence and fighting spirit. Now that the demonic spirit body has been cultivated, it is only at the beginner level. Unless I get the intermediate demonic spirit body cultivation method, I will not be able to absorb demonic energy to continue increasing. Chu Mu thought to himself. His next goal was to get the intermediate demonic spirit body cultivation method. Once he had cultivated the intermediate demonic spirit body, his strength would definitely increase again and become even more powerful. Everything was progressing in a good direction. This is a good event where a pie falls from the sky. Cool phones are waiting for you. Click on the Chinese website's public account, add a friend on WeChat, add a public account, type Kdred, and participate immediately. Everyone has a prize. Follow Kdred's WeChat public account now. Chapter 1955. The Great Demon Burial Abyss was formed by the collapse of 2 large domains. The size of those domains was not inferior to the current ancient heavenly domain at all. The 2 domains added together were extremely huge. Furthermore, there were countless life forms within those 2 regions. At that time, the Righteous Path and Demonic Paths experts had gathered within those 2 regions, each occupying a region as their headquarters. They had fought against each other until the final decisive battle. The Tao Emperor had burned his life force to launch an all-out attack, causing the Devil Emperor to perish. 2 regions collapsed and fell into oblivion, while countless experts from the Righteous Tao and Devil Tao were buried along with him. After this battle, the Righteous Tao prospered, while the Devil Tao declined to the point of vanishing in the end. Not only was the Demon King buried in the Great Demon Burial Abyss, but also countless experts of the Good Path and the Demon Path. Their bodies were shattered, and their primordial spirits were shattered. Under the mixture of the dense death chi and the murderous aura, strange changes gradually occurred, and they became demonic spirits. Inside the demonic spirits, there might be treasures that they carried with them when they were alive, or there might be crystals formed from their cultivation techniques. Whether one could obtain them or not depended on one's luck. Chu Mu could be considered lucky to have obtained the cultivation technique of a low-level demonic spirit body. After all, it was very suitable for him and the others to cultivate. Tyrannical power swam in his bones and muscles, ready to erupt at any time. That kind of power was as strong as a volcanic eruption. Under the sword, another demonic spirit died. This was a low-level demonic spirit of the 2nd refining. Chu Mu could no longer absorb its power, so he gave it to the others to absorb and refine to strengthen their sage bodies. But this time there was no harvest. Gradually, everyone's sage bodies reached the peak of level 9. Next, they had to refine their bodies to the peak of level 9. It had to be said that the demonic spirit body was indeed a very magical cultivation technique. It could allow people who did not have the talent to refine their sage bodies at an extremely fast speed. Of course, the flaws were also obvious. The demon spirit body only had 3 levels: low, intermediate, and high. The highest level was equivalent to a triple refined spirit body. In other words, cultivating the demon spirit body meant that one had no fate with a spirit body. The highest achievement was the high level. Moreover, once one cultivated the demon spirit body and reached the limit of the 9th level saint body, one would not be able to become a true spirit body. One would still have to cultivate according to the demon spirit body's cultivation method. For those who did not have the talent to cultivate the way of the saint body, this was not a flaw at all. However, for those who had the talent to cultivate the way of the saint body, it was a way to destroy one's future. That's right. Chu Mu cultivating the demon spirit body was the same as cutting off his own future. But in life, there was bound to be trade-offs. If he were to cultivate the spirit body, he would first have to obtain the cultivation method of the spirit body. Then he would have to comprehend it and make changes according to his own reality. It would take at least a few decades, or even 100 years. In other words, if he temporarily gave up on other cultivation, it would take at least 100 years to become a spirit body. After that, he would continue to cultivate and increase the power of the spirit body. To reach the level of a triple refined spirit body, it would take at least 200 years. If it was a smooth cultivation, Chu Mu would naturally not choose a cultivation method like the demon spirit body. However, now was not the time to cultivate smoothly. The imperial court and the even more powerful divine clan were chasing after him. If he did not have more strength, how could he survive under the pursuit of strong enemies? How could he fight against them and even kill them? Moreover, Chu Mu was confident that even if he could not cultivate a true spirit body, he could still become a top expert with Yuan, Li, and Sword Dao. The premise was that he had to survive. This was the reason why he did not hesitate to cultivate the demon's spirit body. This time, after killing a demonic specter and refining it, a figure silently approached them. Then he saw Chu Mu and the others. The moment he saw Chu Mu and the others, Chu Mu also noticed him. Chu Mu. This person stared at Chu Mu with a look of disbelief. Then it turned into ecstasy. It was a kind of ecstasy that came from searching high and low for something, only to find it without any effort. Battle Monarch. He was the Battle Monarch. When the Battle Monarch recognized Chu Mu and the others, Chu Mu also recognized him. After all, he had fought with the Battle Monarch's avatar before. The moment he saw the Battle Monarch, Chu Mu's first reaction was to draw his sword. Yes, without the slightest hesitation, he mobilized his strength. The divine wilderness sword energy and the demon spirit body's power perfectly fused together. Under the eternal sword intent, various true intents were also mobilized. The cloud spread out and instantly affected the Battle Monarch. A sword light silently pierced through the clouds and pierced towards the Battle Monarch. Cloud-piercing sword form. Among the various sword forms that Chu Mu had mastered, the cloud-piercing sword form was the fastest. It was also silent and difficult to defend against. The power of this sword had completely reached the level of the initial third refinement. Fast and without any warning, it gave the Battle Monarch a fright. However, he had experienced hundreds of battles and was powerful. His reaction was also very fast, as he immediately pointed out with his finger. Whether it was Chu Mu or the Battle Monarch, they both remembered that this was the demonic specter abyss. Overly powerful energy fluctuations would attract unwanted attention. Therefore, when they attacked, they tried to condense their strength as much as possible to reduce the dissipation of energy fluctuations. Chu Mu's sword and the Battle Monarch's finger collided as expected. Tit for tat. The tip of the finger flickered with a metallic luster and was incomparably hard. It struck the tip of Chu Mu's eternal spiritual sword. The Battle Monarch was very confident that the power of his finger was enough to push back his opponent's sword. Then he would launch his own attack and bring his opponent into the rhythm of the battle, injuring and capturing him alive. However, at the instant of contact, the Zhan Wang's expression changed slightly. That was because his finger attack had actually missed. What he had shattered was only a sword image. The actual sword had shifted away the instant it came into contact with the Zhan Wang's finger and pierced towards the center of his brows from a different angle. That bone-piercing sharpness caused the Battle Monarch's eyebrows to twitch. He was certain that if he had been pierced with his strength, he would not have been able to gain any advantage and would definitely be injured. The Battle Monarch flicked his finger, instantly shooting out a strand of shocking finger energy. It pierced through the void like a sword light, carrying with it the sound of wind and thunder as it shot towards Chumu. Immediately after, his palm changed, and another finger shot towards Chumu's sword, facing the battle monarch's finger energy. Chumu could have easily dodged it and even counterattacked. However, he could not, because behind him were Feng Wuhin and the other four who were absorbing the demonic qi. Once he dodged, the finger energy would definitely hit one of the five. With the battle monarch's strength, the finger energy he shot out was at least at the 3rd refinement level. Its power was shocking, and once hit, it would definitely kill. With the silver spiritual sword in his hand, Yi Futian chopped down, shattering the finger energy. At the same time, the eternal spiritual sword trembled again and dodged the battle monarch's finger energy. It then split into 3 sword light and pierced towards Yi Futian's forehead and eyes respectively. The silver spiritual sword that had shattered the finger energy was like a shower of falling stars. It covered every inch of the battle monarch's body, its sharpness reaching the pinnacle. With both swords in his hands, Chumu unleashed his most powerful attack. Dozens of years ago, Chumu's battle skills were already comparable to Kong Lu and the others. In fact, he might even be slightly better than them. After dozens of years of constant battles, comprehension, and improvement, his battle skills and experience had increased tremendously. Therefore, compared to the battle monarch, he was not the least bit inferior. In fact, he might even be slightly better. Therefore, when the 2 swords were unleashed, the battle monarch was shocked. Back then, when his avatar fought with Chumu, due to the lack of power, Chumu did not display much of his strength. Now that his avatar was here, he finally knew how monstrous Chumu was. In terms of battle skills, the battle monarch was completely suppressed. Enraged, the battle monarch's strength instantly erupted. Like an ancient volcano erupting, an incomparably powerful aura spread out in all directions. Both of his palms fiercely slapped out. Wind and thunder rumbled, and waves roared, pressuring Chumu. These 2 palms were unleashed without any technique or transformation. It was purely about using brute force to suppress others. No matter how many changes you have, no matter how skillful you are, I'll suppress you with brute force, breaking all techniques with brute force. However, facing the 2 palms unleashed by the battle monarch, Chumu could not dodge at all. Otherwise, the 5 people behind him would be struck, and in an instant they would be smashed into meat patties or even torn into pieces, turning into minced meat. Therefore, Chumu had to shatter these 2 palms. The battle monarch, who had unleashed his full strength, was an expert of the advanced 3rd refinement. The power of these 2 palms had also reached the advanced 3rd refinement level. With the current strength that Chumu had displayed, it was impossible for him to resist. However, Chumu did not need to face them head-on. He only needed to change the trajectory of the 2 palms to the left and right. Sword realm change. Sword God descends. Under the use of these 2 secret techniques, Chumu's strength increased in a straight line. He had barely reached the early 3rd refinement level to the peak of the early 3rd refinement level, reaching the intermediate 3rd refinement level. The intermediate 3rd refinement and advanced 3rd refinement were only 1 level apart, but the difference in strength was very obvious. However, with enough skill, it was enough to close this gap. With the heart sword as one, the trajectory of the 2 palms was completely presented to Chumu's perception. The lines on the palms were clearly visible. Without hesitation, Chumu struck out with both swords. Rays of sword light tore through the sky, piercing towards the lines on the 2 palms. The difference in strength caused Chumu's sword light to shatter. However, the 2 palms also changed their trajectory as Chumu wished. They moved to the left and right, passing by Chumu's side and striking towards the other 5 people. Boom! 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 2 loud sounds rang out. The terrifying sound waves spread out in all directions. Dust and smoke billowed. The sound was so powerful that it gave everyone a fright. Under the violent explosion, The terrifying sound waves spread out in all directions. They were like waves crashing into Chumu's back. Borrowing the force of the impact, Chumu's speed exploded. He executed blood, hell burns the heavens, and his strength increased once again. He directly reached the advanced third refinement level. The silver spirit sword lightly trembled, then drew a mysterious and bizarre arc. Slivers of almost black aura emanated from it, emitting terrifying fluctuations as it pierced towards the Battle King. What a good event where a pie falls from the sky. Cool phones are waiting for you. Click on the Chinese website's official account, add a friend on WeChat, add a public account, type Dread, and participate immediately. Everyone has a prize. Follow the official account Dread on WeChat right now. Chapter 1956. That almost black energy emitted an aura that made even Warlord's heart palpitate. The Annihilation Sword Essence. This was not the first time Chumu had used the Annihilation Sword Essence, but it was the first time he had used it after it had completely transformed. The overbearing Annihilation Sword Essence could not tolerate any other power and would have been annihilated by it. However, after it had been transformed into the Annihilation Sword Essence, it was under Chumu's control. Under his control, it was able to integrate all other powers. This required Chumu to expend more energy. In other words, even though Chumu had mastered the Annihilation Sword Essence, which was many times more destructive than the Eternal Sword Essence, he could not use it as he wished. However, as long as he did not use up all his energy, it would not be a problem. Compared to the Eternal Sword Essence that could be used as he wished, the Annihilation Sword Essence was more like a trump card. Now, Chumu was using this trump card. Under the Annihilation Sword Will, the void seemed to be annihilated directly, unable to form the slightest resistance. Silently, the Piercing Cloud Sword move was twice as fast as the Piercing Cloud Sword move of the Eternal Sword Will. In just a moment, the silver spiritual sword had already pierced Warlord's forehead. The Battle King's expression drastically changed. That sword attack was no longer as threatening as before. It was a sword attack that could truly kill him. Moreover, that aura caused the Battle King's heart to palpitate for no apparent reason. He was incomparably fearful and did not dare to be affected by it. However, that sword was too fast. In the face of danger, a jade pendant that Warlord was wearing shattered instantly. A faint layer of light enveloped Warlord's body like a transparent egg, protecting him. Chumu's sword was perfectly blocked by the transparent light screen. However, although the light screen was shockingly powerful, under Chumu's sword it couldn't resist much. The terrifying Annihilation Sword intent easily pierced through the light screen. In reality, it didn't pierce through. Instead, the part of the sword that touched the light screen was annihilated by the Annihilation Sword intent and turned into nothingness. This was the overbearing power of the Annihilation Sword Essence. There was nothing in the world that could not be annihilated. Battle King's pupils instantly contracted. His heart was filled with shock. He originally thought that after the jade pendant shattered, the light screen would be able to resist Chumu's sword for 1 or 2 breaths of time. This amount of time was enough for him to make the most accurate response. After all, the defensive power of the light screen had reached the 3rd refinement middle stage. It was a defensive treasure that only he, as one of the 10 kings of the imperial court, could obtain. However, reality was completely out of his expectations. Not only was he unable to resist for 1 breath of time, he was pierced through in less than 1/10 of that time. The terrifying sword light continued onwards. In the face of danger, Warlord felt his scalp go numb. He forced himself to use his strength to dodge. Unable to completely dodge, the sword slashed through his right arm, leaving a wound. However, no blood flowed out. The wound did not seem to have been cut open. Instead, it seemed to have been melted by some terrifying power. The moment he was struck, Warlord felt that something was wrong. Without any hesitation, he exploded with his strongest power and pointed a finger at Chumu. His finger rapidly enlarged, filling up Chu Mu's world. This was the invincible finger, Heaven's Bane. As the finger descended, the Battle King himself didn't have the slightest bit of reluctance. He quickly retreated. He was sure that his finger couldn't kill Chu Mu. In fact, it couldn't even wound him. The reason he used that finger was to delay Chu Mu and give himself a chance to escape. Yes, escape. Thinking about it, it was laughable. He was the Grand Warlord, one of the 10 kings of the imperial court. He was the current ruler of the imperial court. He possessed astonishing status and power, as well as powerful strength. He could be considered one of the most powerful people in the deep blue world. His main body had personally come to hunt down Chu Mu. That was already a sign of how important Chu Mu was to him. However, he did not expect that after he found Chu Mu, he would not be able to kill him. Instead, he would be injured by Chu Mu's sword. Furthermore, that injury caused him to feel fear, and he had no choice but to retreat. No matter how unwilling and furious he was, Warlord maintained his calm, as if he was an outsider. He could clearly feel that the sword wound on his arm was emitting a strange pain. It seemed to be spreading throughout his body, causing even greater damage. As for him, he had to use his strength to stop it, but the effect was not obvious. It was because of this that he had to retreat as soon as possible. He had to find a relatively safe place to disperse the energy from the sword wound and heal it. Warlord's retreat was out of Chu Mu's expectations. His sky-shattering finger was unable to do anything to Chu Mu. Under Chu Mu's sword, that finger had been defeated, fully displaying the power of the annihilation sword intent. Feng Wuhen and the others had also absorbed and refined the demonic qi. They were looking at Chu Mu in shock. Their minds were in chaos. They did not know who that person was, nor had they ever seen him before. However, they had heard Chu Mu's words. Warlord, one of the 10 kings of the imperial court, the current ruler of the imperial court. He was a terrifying existence that surpassed the middle stage of the 3rd refinement. Compared to last time, it was clear that Warlord's main body had personally come to hunt down Chu Mu. However, in the end, Warlord was the one who was forced to retreat. That feeling was indescribable. It was as if, in his mind, a high and mighty immortal who was not tainted by the mundane world was suddenly seen eating chicken drumsticks with a mouth full of oil. The huge difference was unimaginable and shocking. That person, is he really Warlord? Lei Ba asked dumbfoundedly. His face was filled with disbelief. I think so. Wind without trace said in an uncertain tone. He is Warlord. Moreover, he came here personally. Chu Mu said calmly. He used a calm tone to tell them the truth. Now that he has escaped, it means that I am no longer afraid of Warlord. However, that is all. After all, Warlord is one of the 10 kings. There are other kings in the imperial court who are even stronger than him. As he spoke, Chu Mu's expression suddenly changed. He felt that there were powerful fiendish auras coming from all directions that were rapidly closing in. Brothers, there is a large amount of demonic qi approaching. Retreat quickly, Chu Mu said quickly. Everyone's expression changed when they heard that. Ever since they stepped into the demonic qi zone, they had been very careful. Every time they attacked, they would try their best to restrain their auras. They wanted to kill the demonic qi in one fell swoop. If they couldn't, they would let it go. They didn't expect that they would still attract a large amount of demonic qi. Of course, it was because of the battle between Warlord and Chu Mu. Both of them had their reservations, but after the battle, they brought out their true strength. Especially Warlord's 2 palms and the last finger attack. He purposely created a large amount of demonic qi to attract a large amount of demonic qi and kill Chu Mu and the others. It could be said that it was Warlord's revenge before he escaped. If he could borrow the demonic qi to kill Chu Mu and the others, it would be the best. Even if he couldn't kill them, he would at least be able to injure them. It had to be said that Warlord's plan was very good. Even if he had to escape, he would still want to kill Chu Mu and the others. being surrounded by a large amount of demonic chi. Even saint sovereigns would be afraid, let alone them. Without the slightest hesitation, they immediately moved and quickly retreated in the direction of the nether spirit domain. The demonic fiends advanced at an extremely fast speed. Very soon, they had surrounded them from all directions. "Kill our way out!" After Warlord escaped, Chumu stopped using Sword God's Descent and Blood Prison, burning the heavens. Of these two secret techniques, the former consumed the power of the secret technique and was very difficult to recover from. The latter burned one's blood essence for too long and would affect one's foundation. Thus, he didn't use it if he could. The sword domain transformation was different. Strictly speaking, it could be considered a secret technique, but it could also not be considered a secret technique. It consumed the power of the sword domain, and the sword domain had a lot of power. It could be used for a long time. Now, Chumu's sword domain transformation could increase the power of his sword by 8 times. Adding on the eternal sword intent and the low-level demonic spirit body, Chumu's strength was not inferior to any low-level, 3rd refinement expert. With 2 swords in hand, he easily killed 2 demonic chi. Feng Wuhen and the other 4 also brought out their strength. At this time, they had to quickly kill a way out and leave this place before more demonic chi arrived. When the demonic chi died, its aura immediately dissipated. However, this was not the time to absorb and refine it. There was no time to stop. They could only watch as the demonic chi dissipated. Kill! Kill! Demonic chi not only had a more terrifying physical attack than the wandering corpses, but also had a more terrifying mental attack than the nether spirits. Fortunately, most of the demonic chi surrounding them were at the 1st refinement level, and some were at the 2nd refinement level. There were no 3rd refinement level demonic chi. Therefore, the mental attack had no effect on them. The great demon burial abyss was not only a dangerous place, but also an excellent training ground. If one could withstand the illusory attacks of the nether spirits and the mental attacks of the demonic chi, one's mental will would be tempered and strengthened. It would become more resilient and resistant. Suddenly, a tyrannical mental will attacked directly from the front. It was full of chaos, and its target was Chumu. Chumu's movements paused slightly. He was obviously affected. The demonic chi also took the opportunity to rush over. Its pitch-black claws were like lightning, grabbing at Chumu's head. In an instant, Chumu felt his mental will sink. The eternal sword essence shook and dispelled this effect. Then he slashed out with his sword. This slash used the power of the annihilation sword essence again. This was a 3rd refinement demonic aura. Although it was only at the initial stage of the 3rd refinement, it was comparable to a peak initial stage of the 3rd refinement. Even a middle stage of the 3rd refinement might not be able to kill it quickly. If he wanted to retreat as soon as possible, he could not hesitate. The annihilation sword essence should be used when necessary. Under the annihilation sword intent, the Tao beheading slashed the 3rd refined early stage demonic fiend in half. The terrifying power of annihilation instantly spread out. Author's note: pies falling from the sky. Cool phones waiting for you. Click on the Chinese website's official account, add a friend on WeChat, add a public account, type Dread, and participate immediately. There's a prize for everyone. Follow Dread's official account on WeChat now. Chapter 1957. What a terrifying demonic aura. What's going on over there? Some of the experts who had also entered the Great Demon Abyss felt that a large amount of demonic aura was gathering in the distance. The shocking aura was spreading in all directions like a storm. While these experts were puzzled, their hearts were also palpitating. Walking in the devilish zone, one had to be extremely careful and cautious. The slightest mistake could cost one's life. Therefore, even though they felt a large amount of demonic aura gathering and were curious, they did not dare to go forward to investigate. Moreover, such a large amount of demonic aura gathering was obviously caused by someone carelessly causing too much commotion and attracting a large amount of demonic aura. Only death awaited them. They could not help but feel sorry for those people. Be careful! A sword light seemed to come from the horizon, shattering the demonic aura that was clawing at Wang Sun's back and saving him. The one who made this move was Chu Mu. Among the group, Wang Sun's strength was the lowest. Even if he hid, it was not much use against the demonic aura. This demonic aura seemed to be able to easily discover Wang Sun's position. If not for Chu Mu's timely rescue, Wang Sun would have been seriously injured, even if he did not die. "Thank you," Wang Sun said quickly. In a flash, the demonic sword in his hand was shockingly sharp. It sliced apart the sharp claws of a demonic aura. Whoosh! 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 The demonic aura was instantly dismembered. The 6 of them worked together, and with Chu Mu as the tip of the sword, they opened up a bloody path. None of the demonic aura could withstand his sword. There were demonic auras constantly chasing after them from behind and surrounding them from both sides. There were also demonic auras in front of them, but there were fewer of them. That was the direction Chu Mu and the others were breaking out of the encirclement. As long as they left the devilish zone, there would be a portion of demonic auras that would not chase after them. Once they left the Yin spirit zone, they would be safe. Among the 6 of them, Chu Mu's strength was the strongest. Not only that, his strength far surpassed the others. Hence, as the main force, he killed many devil fiends while the others acted as support. At this time, it was time to run for their lives. Besides Chu Mu, the other 5 all erupted with their full strength. They even used the blood prison burning heavens secret technique that Chu Mu had taught them. Their bodies burned with a layer of blood-red flames, and their strength had clearly increased. Go all out and kill your way out of the encirclement of the devil fiends. Feng Wuhen was injured, followed by Xia Yongxuan. Kong Lu and Lei Ba were also injured. In the end, the weakest Wang Sun was also injured. Among the 6 of them, only Chu Mu was not injured because he was the strongest. Almost none of the demonic auras could withstand his sword. Moreover, Chu Mu's will was incomparably strong, and he could completely resist mental attacks. He had the blood shark robe and blood shark armor on his body, and he had cultivated a low-grade devil spirit body. His defense was strong, and his vitality was astonishing. The claws of the devil fiends carried a shocking demonic poison that could corrode a person's body and damage their life foundation. They had to expel it as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would cause irreparable damage. Suddenly, a roar rang out. That roar was incomparably shocking. Chu Mu and the others' faces changed drastically. A terrifying demonic aura swept out like a storm. It was extremely shocking, and the devil fiends retreated one after another. Chu Mu struck out with both swords. The cross-sword light shot out and directly killed the 4 devil fiends in front of him, clearing a path. "Brothers, please retreat first." Feng Wuhen and the others also knew that they had no power to resist the powerful devil fiend approaching. Now that they were injured, they couldn't provide any help to Chu Mu. Retreating was the best choice. As Feng Wuhen and the others retreated, the devil fiend also appeared in front of Chu Mu. An incomparably tyrannical mental attack was so strong that it almost materialized. It tore through space, broke through the mountains, and rushed towards Chu Mu. It was too fast. There was no way to dodge it, and there was no way to dodge it. Chu Mu immediately mobilized the eternal sword intent and spread it throughout his spiritual world. It combined with the God sealing compass, causing the stability of his spiritual world to increase by several times. Facing the tyrannical mental attack, Chu Mu only frowned slightly. He wasn't injured at all. Shortly after, the devil fiend also rapidly approached Chu Mu. The fluctuation of its aura let Chu Mu know that this was a peak advanced 3rd refining devil fiend. It was even stronger than the warlord. Of course, it couldn't be said that it was stronger than the warlord. It only had 2 methods to approach the devil fiend, mental attacks, and sharp claws. It didn't have much intelligence. On the other hand, the warlord was a veteran expert. He had intelligence and trump cards. Peak Advanced Third Refining. This is the strongest enemy I've encountered so far. Chu Mu thought to himself. He took a deep breath, and his aura instantly calmed down. It was as if the power of a volcano was brewing under the silence, ready to erupt at any time. The Peak Advanced Third Refining Devil Fiend viciously clawed at Chu Mu. Its speed and power were incomparably ferocious. Blood Prison burns the sky. Sword God's Descent. Kill! With a low roar, Yi Shiwen unleashed two swords, cloud-piercing sword style, Dao-cutting sword style, heaven and earth cross-slash. The Eternal Sword Intent and Annihilation Sword Intent were unleashed together. The terrifying power directly slashed apart the Devil Fiend's claw and slashed towards its body. It was unstoppable. After using Blood Prison, Chu Mu's strength directly reached the peak of the intermediate third refining realm. After using Sword God's Descent, his strength once again increased by leaps and bounds, reaching the peak of the third refining realm. The Annihilation Sword Intent was a sword intent that was purely destructive. Even a peak third refining realm strength couldn't withstand it. Under the sword, the tyrannical peak Advanced Third Refining Realm strength couldn't withstand Chu Mu's sword. Under the terrifying power of the Annihilation Sword Intent, it was annihilated. Its body shattered and countless amounts of demonic aura dissipated. This made Chu Mu feel extremely regretful. How powerful and pure was the demonic aura of a peak third refinement high-stage demonic aura. Immediately after, a pitch-black crystal appeared. Chu Mu reacted quickly. He directly used his sword to pick up the crystal and put it into his space ring. Both swords struck out, creating hundreds of sword radiances. They were densely packed like a rainstorm, bombarding the semicircle in front of him. Wherever the domineering and sharp sword radiances passed, the devil fiends were killed, destroyed, and killed. An area of more than 1,000 meters was cleared. However, the commotion was so great that it would definitely attract more devil fiends. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chu Mu didn't continue fighting and left immediately. After meeting up with Feng Wuhen and the others, the group left the devil fiend region and entered the ghost region. Without stopping, they quickly headed towards the wandering corpse region. Along the way, although they were attacked by the ghost region again and again, they didn't suffer any injuries. Finally, they left the ghost region and retreated to the wandering corpse region. Only then did the group heave a sigh of relief. Although the wandering corpse region was considered dangerous, the wandering corpse was the most powerful. However, it was only second refining. It didn't pose any threat to them at all. "Brothers, quickly heal your injuries," Chu Mu said. Everyone knew that the matter was urgent. Without any hesitation, they immediately healed their injuries. Chu Mu stood guard at the side. Even if he stopped the blood prison burning heaven and sword god's descent secret technique, his strength was still at third refining. While guarding the group, Chu Mu took out the pitch-black crystal that he had obtained from killing the peak Advanced Third Refining Realm Devil Fiend. It looked very similar to the crystal that he had obtained from the low-rank demonic spirit body. Could it be that there is a demonic spirit body cultivation technique in it? Chu Mu thought to himself, if he could obtain a medium-rank demonic spirit body cultivation technique, it would be the best. He could then kill his way into the devil fiend region again and cultivate a medium-rank demonic spirit body. The low-rank demonic spirit body had already allowed Chu Mu's strength to increase significantly. If he cultivated a medium-rank demonic spirit body, his strength would definitely increase again. The silver light spiritual sword slashed, carrying the power of the Annihilation Sword Essence. Within a radius of 100 meters, it drew a circle around the group. The terrifying power of the Annihilation Sword Essence spread out with shocking power. It was enough to seriously injure or kill a second refining expert who entered the range. What a pity. After a slash, Chu Mu glanced at the silver light spirit sword in his hand. This silver light spirit sword that had reached the middle rank level was currently covered in mottled spots, as if a normal iron sword had been corroded by strong acid. It looked like a tattered sword that had lost a lot of its spirituality. There was no other way. The annihilation sword essence was too overbearing. The silver light spiritual sword could not withstand it too many times. Stabbing the sword into the ground, Chu Mu's consciousness entered the pitch-black crystal. This time, he did not have the same experience as the first time he obtained a low-rank demonic spirit body. What he obtained this time was not a demonic spirit body. This was another cultivation technique. This cultivation technique was called the 10,000 True Prison Breaching Technique. Chu Mu was disappointed that he did not obtain a medium-rank demonic spirit body. After all, that was what he wanted the most. However, since he had obtained another technique, Chu Mu looked it over. After all, it was obtained from a peak third refinement high-stage devil fiend's body. Perhaps it wouldn't be any weaker than a low-level devil soul body. However, Chu Mu did not hold much hope. After all, there were definitely better cultivation techniques than the demonic spirit body. For example, his divine wilderness sword art. The problem was whether it was suitable for him to cultivate. If this 10,000 true prison breaching technique was a body cultivation technique, it would be useless to him. If it was a chi cultivation technique, it would be useless as well. But no matter what, since he had obtained it, it would be a waste not to look at it. With one look, Chu Mu was shocked. His face was lifeless and indescribable. 10,000 true prison breaching technique. This was not a chi cultivation technique, nor was it a body cultivation technique. It was also not a spirit cultivation technique. It was a very special cultivation technique. A cultivation technique that Chu Mu had never heard of before. As expected of the ancient era, not only is there a demonic spirit body, but there is also a 10,000 true prison breaching technique. An unimaginable era, a great era that people yearn for. Chu Mu sighed. His eyes revealed a look of yearning. Indeed, the ancient era was an era where experts were born in large numbers. There were many peerless experts, and saint emperors were everywhere. In such an era, there were countless marvelous arts and techniques. He had a thirst to enter such an era and compete with countless experts. A good event where a pie falls from the sky. Cool phones are waiting for you. Click on the Chinese network's official account, WeChat friend, add official account, type Kdred, and participate immediately. Everyone has a prize. Follow Kdred's official account immediately. Chapter 1958. P.S. Look at the exclusive story behind The Lone God of the Sword and listen to your suggestions for the novel. Pay attention to the Chinese website's official account and tell me secretly. The 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique had a profound meaning within. 10,000 didn't simply mean 10,000, but it meant a lot. Truth meant truth. Truth meant discarding the dregs and keeping the essence, returning to one's original state. 10,000 truth meant that there were many kinds of power, like rivers flowing into the sea. It would eventually get rid of the dregs and keep the essence, returning to one's original state. It was a beautiful yearning. Break always meant breaking, shattering, breaking, and so on. It had the meaning of breaking the old and welcoming the new. Prison meant purgatory, hell. It symbolized ugliness and darkness. It was the opposite of true goodness. It was a kind of restraint, a kind of shackle. Prison breaking was to get rid of ugliness, to break free from restraints, and to shatter shackles. Chu Mu finished reading the general outline of the 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique and understood the meaning of this special technique's name. Returning to one's original state, breaking the old to welcome the new. Chu Mu muttered to himself. His eyes sparkled with disbelief and excitement. Chu Mu could cultivate the 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique. It could even be said that, in the deep blue world, he might be the only person who could cultivate this technique. At least that was the case for now, because there was a huge prerequisite to cultivating the 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique. That was to completely grasp the unification of energy, perfectly combining one's yuan, li, and physical strength into one. If one couldn't do this, then they wouldn't be able to cultivate the 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique. Once the 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique was cultivated, a brand new power would be condensed in the middle dantian. This power was called the 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique. According to the description of this technique, if one used normal techniques to combine yuan, li, and physical strength, the power would be 1 + 1. But if the 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique was refined into the 10,000 truth prison-breaking technique, it would be 10 times stronger. In other words, Chu Mu's divine wilderness sword essence power and the low-level demon astral body power, when combined with the energy fusion technique, would have a power of 2. Then the 10,000 prison-breaching true strength would have a power of 20. A tenfold increase in power. Chu Mu repeated, and his eyes gradually lit up. Under the situation where his power was increased by 10 times, if he attacked with all his strength, he estimated that he could reach the strength of a half step to the 4th refinement. However, whether he could reach that level was still unknown. Only when he truly grasped it would he know. Let's finish reading it first, and then divide our attention to comprehend it. When all of you have recovered from your injuries, we can practice the 10,000 truth prison-breaking skill. Chu Mu thought to himself and immediately continued reading. He paid attention to the movements in the surroundings, while diverting some of his attention to temper the spirit sword with the obliteration sword essence, causing it to undergo a transformation and become the obliteration spirit sword. His strength still had room for improvement. He could still become more powerful. This feeling was very, very good. Chu Mu finished reading the entire 10,000 prison-breaching skill. At the end of the message, the content made Chu Mu stunned. The last content could be divided into 2 parts. The first part was the words of the creator of the 10,000 prison-breaching skill. It meant that the 10,000 prison-breaching skill was not perfect. It could only be considered as a starting point. There was still potential to be discovered, but he did not have the time to perfect it. He hoped that the person who obtained it after practicing it would be able to continue to perfect it and improve it. The second part of the content was about a secret technique. It was a very unique secret technique called Wither. Wither. After reading this secret technique, Chu Mu's heart trembled. Wither was a secret technique that could be said to be evil. It was also a very terrifying secret technique. It was different from other secret techniques. Once it was used, it could not be stopped. Moreover, what it consumed was the cultivator's life force. Life force could also be called life force. There was another way to describe it, which was lifespan. In the cultivation realm, the eternal ancient realm meant that one's lifespan had reached an astonishing level. If one did not die halfway, it would not be a problem to live for 100,000 years. After passing through the nirvana realm, one would completely shed the mortal body and transform it into a sage body, thus possessing a longer lifespan. Once one was promoted to a peerless expert, one's lifespan would increase many times. It would not be a big problem to live for hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. Of course, from ancient times until now, almost no expert had lived for so long. The stronger one was, the more unwilling he was, the more he wanted to reach a higher realm. It was inevitable that he would go out to explore, which was dangerous and could even lead to death. Wither's secret technique. Wither meant to wither and die. It was like a plant that had lost its life force and would eventually wither and die. Wither meant to be deep and profound. It meant to be ancient, green, and full of life. Wither meant to overdraw one's life force. It was not that there were no secret techniques that overdrew one's life force. but every one of them was very precious. However, Chumu had never heard of a secret technique that was as decisive as Wither's secret technique. Once it was used, it could not be stopped, and one's lifespan would constantly be consumed and reduced. I hope there is no need to use it. Chumu thought to himself. He began to comprehend the 10,000 prison-breaking art. Time passed slowly. When Fo Muhin and the others had recovered from their injuries, Chumu had also completely comprehended the 10,000 prison-breaking art and Wither's secret technique. Even if the creator had said that the 10,000 prison-breaking art was not perfect, the current Chumu did not have the qualifications to perfect it. The level of the 10,000 prison-breaking art was too high. It was beyond Chumu's current realm. However, perfecting it was a matter for later. Right now, he had to master it. Brothers, let's spend some time to master the technique of combining strength. Chumu said to the others who had recovered from their injuries, I obtained a new technique from the powerful evil devil that I killed, the 10,000 prison-breaking art. If you master it, your strength will increase by a lot. But the prerequisite is that you have to master the Chi Power Unification Technique. Everyone immediately showed joy and expressed that they would do their best to master the Chi Power Unification Technique as soon as possible. They looked at Chumu with sparkling eyes, as if they were looking at a national treasure. Indeed, in their eyes, Chumu was a national treasure. In the past, their strength was often slowly cultivated by themselves, and the chances of them getting lucky were very small. But since they agreed to form the ancient sword alliance with Chumu, it was immediately different. Their gains in the Ice Secret Realm and now in the Devil Burial Abyss were all thanks to Chumu's great luck. Of course, such great luck wasn't so easy to obtain. One had to take a considerable risk. For example, becoming enemies with an ancient and powerful faction like the Imperial Court. If not for forming the ancient sword alliance with Chumu, they wouldn't have come out and become enemies with the Imperial Court. Everything had its pros and cons. It depended on how one dealt with it. Everyone's progress in the Chi Power Unification Technique was faster than Chumu's. It was not because their comprehension was better than Chumu's, but because Chumu did not have anyone to teach him back then. Even the Chi Power Unification Technique was comprehended by himself from the sinners. There was no one to guide him, and it was all based on himself. Everyone's cultivation was taught by Chumu, and Chumu did not hide anything. Everyone's comprehension was not bad, so it was naturally not difficult for them to cultivate. Chumu began to cultivate the 10,000 true prison-breaking skill. Physique, there was the power of the physique. Even if one cultivated the demon spirit body, there was still the power of the physique. Under the circulation of the 10,000 true prison-breaking skill, Chumu stimulated the power of his physique. At the same time, the divine wilderness sword essence was also circulating. The power of his physique gradually flowed from the outside into his body. Under the continuous circulation of the divine wilderness sword essence, it converged towards his middle dantian. These two powers, one clockwise and one counterclockwise, collided at his middle dantian. There was no collision between Mars and Earth. Under the miraculous effect of the 10,000 true prison-breaking skill, the two powers merged like water and milk. As the two powers merged gradually, a drop of silver-gray liquid fell from Chumu's middle dantian. Following that, Chumu realized that his sword essence was almost completely depleted. The power of his physique was also almost completely depleted. In the end, only a drop of silver-gray liquid was condensed. The silver-gray liquid was very smooth, like mercury, and it quietly stayed in his middle dantian. This scene made Chumu dumbfounded. He looked at the drop of silver-gray liquid in his middle dantian. It was only the size of a fingernail, and he had mixed feelings. Carefully sensing it, that drop of liquid contained a tyrannical power. It was more than 10 times stronger than the pure power of his physique or the divine wilderness sword essence. He could confirm that this was indeed the 10,000 true prison-breaking skill. However, it was too little. His physique and sword essence were only able to condense a drop of the 10,000 true prison-breaking skill. He felt that it was not worth it. Anyway, the power contained in this 10,000 true prison-breaking skill is indeed very strong. Since that's the case, I'll condense a few more drops first, and then try another drop later. Chu Mu thought to himself. He took out some elixirs and consumed them to recover his sword essence and physique. Otherwise, he felt that his whole body was very weak, and his strength had obviously decreased by a lot. During this period, some wandering corpses noticed Chu Mu and the others and quickly approached them. However, when they were within 100 meters of Chu Mu, they activated the annihilation sword chi left by him and were directly dismembered. Since there was such a guarantee, they did not get distracted and focused on cultivating. As they cultivated, Chu Mu also condensed the second drop of the 10,000 true prison-breaking skill. He took another elixir to recover his strength and prepared to condense the third drop. From start to finish, Chu Mu spent a total of 10 days to condense 5 drops of the 10,000 true prison-breaking skill. As for the others, they had also reached the entry level of the energy unification technique. After these days, the demonic spirit should have retreated. "Let's go in again," Chu Mu said. "Okay." The others had no objection. They had not cultivated the demonic spirit body yet. Once again, they entered the Yin spirit territory and resisted the attacks of the Yin spirits. After passing through the Yin spirit territory, they re-entered the demonic spirit territory. Sure enough, after 10 days, the group of demonic spirits that chased after Chu Mu and the others had also retreated. However, the residual demonic spirit fluctuations in the air were extremely strong. What a good activity for a pie in the sky. Cool mobile phones are waiting for you. Click on the Chinese network's official account, WeChat friend, add official account, type Kdred, and participate immediately. Everyone has a prize. Follow Kdred's official account immediately. Chapter 1959. What a terrifying power. The warlord opened his eyes, revealing his exhaustion. In order to disperse the destructive sword intent that Chu Mu had left in his body, he had spent a lot of energy. His body had also suffered some injuries, but luckily he had enough pills to recover quickly. What kind of power is that? The warlord squinted his eyes and pondered. He couldn't be at ease until he figured out what that power was. It was simply too terrifying. It was simply a terrifying power born for the sake of destruction. Even a trace of it contained a destructive power. Just a trace of it required a great deal of effort to disperse it. Moreover, his meridians and other parts of his body had also suffered a certain amount of damage. What a terrifying person, the warlord said to himself. In the past, he had thought that Chu Mu was just an ant. Even after his clone was killed by Chu Mu, he had changed his mind slightly. He thought that Chu Mu was just a strong ant, nothing more. However, after the battle with his real body, he realized that Chu Mu had unknowingly grown to the point where he could threaten him. He had to be wary of Chu Mu. That kind of powerful strength, that kind of power, made him feel fearful. Of course, the previous battle was only the beginning. The Battle King's strength had yet to be fully displayed. He still had trump cards. However, the Great Devil Burial Abyss wasn't a good place to fight. Originally, he thought that he would be able to easily kill Chu Mu, but the reality was the complete opposite. Maybe he's still hiding something, the warlord said to himself. At this time, he didn't dare to underestimate Chu Mu anymore. If he still underestimated Chu Mu and thought that Chu Mu was easy to deal with, then he wasn't fit to be one of the 10 kings of the imperial court. Even though he didn't want to admit it right now, Chu Mu had the power to threaten him. He was even a threat to the imperial court. Of course, the war monarch didn't want Chu Mu to have the power to go against the imperial court. He, the war king of the imperial dynasty, was just the tip of the iceberg of the imperial dynasty's strength. No matter what, Chu Mu was now a great threat and had to be eradicated. First, I'll obtain the low-level demonic spirit body cultivation method and cultivate it. Then I'll cultivate the mid-level demonic spirit body. At that time, my strength will definitely increase significantly. The Battle King thought to himself. Chu Mu posed a great threat to him, so he had to work hard to increase his strength. Only then would he be able to kill Chu Mu and prove his authority as a Battle King. Otherwise, it would be a dereliction of duty. Furthermore, if his strength increased, his ranking among the 10 Battle Kings would also rise. If it was in the past, the Battle King wouldn't have come to the Demon Burial Abyss because it was too dangerous. With his current status and strength, there was no need for him to take such a risk. However, the situation was different now. He had to take the risk. Inside his dantian there were 5 drops of silver-gray liquid that looked like mercury. It was the new power that Chu Mu had obtained after fusing his sword origin and physical strength, the 10,000 truth-breaking force. The 6 of them entered the demonic domain again to hunt the demonic spirits. Their movements were still as careful as before. Chu Mu wanted to test the true power and duration of the 10,000 truth-breaking force. Therefore, when he encountered the first demonic spirit, he directly used a drop of the 10,000 truth-breaking force. The drop of mercury-like 10,000 truth-breaking force immediately spread out from his dantian. It didn't circulate in his meridians like the sword origin, nor did it circulate in his bones and muscles like the physical strength. Instead, it was in between the two, covering his entire body. There were 2 benefits to circulating the power in this way. First, it was faster. Secondly, it could protect the body from both inside and outside. The moment Chu Mu used the 10,000 truth-breaking force, he knew that it wasn't a power that could be used in one go. After all, it was a power formed by fusing his physical strength and sword origin. If it could only be used once, it would be too cheap. With the silver light spirit, sword destroyed, Chu Mu could only use the eternal spirit sword. Chu Mu, who didn't use the sword domain change, heaven burning blood prison, and sword god's descent, had the powerful eternal sword intent, shocking true meaning, and the 10,000 truth-breaking force, which allowed his strength to continuously increase. The eternal sword intent was the highest level of sword intent. It wasn't inferior to the power of law at all. To a certain extent, it was even strengthened by Chu Mu's self-created sword style. The 10,000 truth-breaking force was a 10-fold increase after fusing the power of the low-level demon spirit body and the divine wilderness sword origin. It should be known that Chu Mu's divine wilderness sword origin was cultivated from the divine wilderness sword technique. Its power was far superior to other sword origins. After being refined in the solitary sword sect's secret realm, its power was increased 10-fold. It was extremely terrifying. The 10,000 truth-breaking force formed by the fusion was unparalleled. Middle third refining. This was the power of Chu Mu when he used the 10,000 truth-breaking force. If he didn't use it, it would be the early third refining. Using a trace of the 10,000 truth-breaking force, a powerful force spread through his body and into the eternal spirit sword in his hand. Without any surprise, the peak second refining demonic spirit died on the spot. Under the 10,000 truth-breaking force, not only did its power increase, but its speed also increased slightly. The peak second refining demonic spirit didn't even have time to react before it died. The 5 of them immediately absorbed and refined the aura of the peak second refining demonic spirit. After refining, their sage bodies reached the peak of the 9th level. Next, they would prepare to break through to the low-level demon spirit body. Is that the power of the 10,000 truth-breaking force? Chu Mu's sword was extremely fast, but it also made everyone's eyes light up. They could all see that the speed of the sword was much faster than before. When one's strength reached Chu Mu's level, every change in the speed of the sword was very significant. In a battle, a little faster or a little slower would often lead to different results. It was like the difference between life and death. Looking for demonic spirits, killing them, absorbing and refining them. This process was constantly repeated. In the end, Chu Mu experimented and found that a drop of the 10,000 truth-breaking force could last for about an hour in a normal battle. This was several times less than the simple combination of strength. If he used the sword move many times, he could only last for 15 minutes at most, which was 4 times shorter. Chu Mu also came to the conclusion that the 10,000 truth-breaking force couldn't be used as a normal battle tactic. It was more like a trump card. The strength of the initial third refining was currently enough to deal with the demonic spirits, as long as they didn't encounter a demonic spirit that was too strong. Time flew by. As Chu Mu attacked again and again, he fused his sword heaven-earth and other comprehensions into his sword to improve his understanding and application of the sword. The range of the heart and sword as one expanded, and the amplification of the sword domain also increased. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed since Chu Mu and the others entered the great demon abyss. In these 2 years, everyone's strength had increased significantly. However, they didn't get the intermediate demonic spirit body as they wished. One had to know that thousands of demonic spirits had died in their hands, but they didn't get the intermediate demonic spirit body. This puzzled them. They didn't know that many of the demonic spirits in the great demon abyss only had one type of inheritance. For example, the 10,000 truth-breaking force was unique, and so was the demonic spirit body. They got the elementary demonic spirit body, but Battle King got the intermediate demonic spirit body. As for the advanced demonic spirit body, no one knew where it was. Under such circumstances, Chu Mu and the others couldn't get the intermediate demonic spirit body, and Battle King couldn't get the elementary demonic spirit body either. This meant that Chu Mu and the others couldn't improve their demonic spirit bodies, which meant that Battle King couldn't cultivate the demonic spirit body. Other than Chu Mu, the other 5 people had all trained low-rank Devil Soul body in this period of time. Moreover, they had successfully grasped the energy unification technique and began to comprehend the 10,000 truth prison-breaking strength. After cultivating the low-level demonic spirit body and grasping the technique of unity of strength, everyone's strength had increased significantly. Wang Sun's strength was originally at the intermediate second refinement, but after 2 years he had reached the peak second refinement. With stealth, he could assassinate someone at the peak second refinement and could pose a threat to someone at the half-third refinement. Wang Sun's strength was the weakest among the group. Lei Ba and Kong Lu were both at the advanced second refinement. Now, they had cultivated the low-level demon spirit body and mastered the unity of strength technique. Moreover, each of them had other gains. Therefore, the increase in their strength was very obvious. They had both reached the half-third refinement level. Xia Yongshuan's strength was originally at the peak second refinement, but now he had barely reached the early third refinement. As for Feng Wuhan, he had stabilized at the early third refinement. Strength wasn't the same as cultivation level. The two could be the same, or one could be higher and the other could be lower. In 2 years, they hadn't reached their goal of all having the strength of the third refinement. However, such an increase was already very shocking. As long as they cultivated the 10,000 truth hell-breaking technique and condensed the 10,000 truth hell-breaking technique, everyone's strength would increase again. At that time, Wang Sun would surpass the limit of the second refinement, while Lei Ba and Kong Lu would barely reach the third refinement. Xia Yongshuan would reach the peak of the early third refinement, and Feng Wuhan's strength would reach the intermediate third refinement. In 2 years, they had experienced many dangers, and even faced death several times. In the end, they had survived and gained a lot. Apart from various increases in strength, they had also obtained something called the demonic crystal. As the name suggested, it was the crystallization of demonic power. It could be absorbed and refined, and it was helpful for the cultivation of the demonic spirit body. Now, they had decided to leave the great demon abyss. Let's find a place to cultivate the 10,000 truth hell-breaking technique and store some 10,000 truth hell-breaking technique. The 10,000 truth hell-breaking technique was undoubtedly a very powerful force. It was always good to store more. Once the 10,000 truth hell-breaking technique was stored to a certain extent, the next step would be to attack the imperial court, because now they had the strength to fight against the imperial court. Chu Mu and the others had just left the Great Demon Abyss. Not long after, Warlord also left the Great Demon Abyss and quickly returned to the imperial court. What a good event! Cool phones are waiting for you. Follow me. Open the Chinese network's official account, add a friend on WeChat, add a public account, type Kdred, and participate immediately. Everyone has a prize. Follow Kdred's official account now. Chapter 1960. P.S. Read the exclusive story behind The Lone God of the Sword and listen to your suggestions for the novel. Pay attention to the Chinese network's official account and tell me secretly. No one knew that they had entered and left the Great Devil Burial Abyss. Apart from themselves, no one else knew. In the 2 years that they had been in the Great Devil Burial Abyss, they had experienced many life and death crises. However, they had also obtained many opportunities under these life and death crises, and their strength had increased. In 2 years, their improvement was more obvious than their usual 200 years of improvement. After leaving the Great Devil Burial Abyss, they had disappeared without a trace, like a stone sinking into the sea. No one had expected that Chu Mu and the others would be in the Black and White Yuan Palace. After leaving the Great Devil Burial Abyss, Chu Mu had led everyone to the Black and White Yuan Palace. Back then, the Black and White Yuan Palace had surrounded and intercepted him. After returning from the land of exile, they had chased after Chu Mu again. If not for Chu Mu's sufficient strength, he would have ended up in the same miserable state he had been in decades ago. Therefore, Chu Mu's strength had reached a level that the Black and White Yuan Palace's peerless experts had to look up to. However, enmity was enmity. Chu Mu couldn't just laugh it off. Even if the other party had become an ant in his eyes, he would still trample them to death. Therefore, the 2 peerless experts of the Black and White Yuan Palace had been killed by Chu Mu without any resistance. Their primordial spirits had been captured, their consciousness shattered and turned into nourishment for the heavenly puppet. The imperial court had been established by an ancient saint emperor. After countless eras, it had gradually been passed down. Today, it had become one of the top forces of the human race in the deep blue world. It had a deep foundation and many experts. The location of the imperial court's headquarters had always been a mystery to many people. However, the imperial court had a few branches outside. Coincidentally, Feng Wuhen knew of one of these branches. Even as a branch, it was still very mysterious. Moreover, they weren't afraid of being known by others. This was a branch of the imperial court. Who would dare to provoke it? Today, the branch division had 6 terrifying enemies. They didn't seem to fear the imperial dynasty at all. Since it was a branch of the imperial court, the 6 of them showed no mercy. They killed everyone who dared to attack them. The last one left was a peerless first refinement cultivator. He was the strongest cultivator in this branch and also the one with the highest status. Where is the imperial court headquarters? Wang Sun unintentionally brushed his finger across the demonic sword in his hand. His cold gaze landed on the other party's face as he asked in a sinister voice. His tone was like a sinister wind that caused the other party to involuntarily tremble. You won't have a good ending for being enemies with the imperial dynasty. The person in charge of this branch was a peerless expert. Even though he was trembling, he still spoke with an unyielding tone. This was because the imperial dynasty was really strong and gave him enough confidence. The imperial dynasty will cease to exist soon. Wang Sun chuckled. You better tell me the location of the imperial court's headquarters. Otherwise, you'll have a taste of what it means to beg for death. The threat caused the first refinement cultivator's face to turn pale. However, he still wasn't willing to submit. No matter how Wang Sun threatened him, It was useless. Wang's son, your methods aren't working. Why don't you try something else? Leiba smiled. One had to say that the imperial dynasty was really good at nurturing people. Even when facing Chu Mu and the other 5, who he couldn't resist at all, even when he knew that he might be killed, he still didn't reveal any information. Let me do it. Chu Mu stepped forward and looked at the peerless first refinement cultivator. His expression was calm as he said, neither quickly nor slowly, let's try the Mo Luo secret technique that we got from the Demon Burial Abyss. During the 2 years in the Demon Burial Abyss, everyone had gained a lot. The Mo Luo secret technique was one of them. However, currently only Chu Mu had learned it. Maybe you don't know what the Mo Luo secret technique is, but it has another name. It's called the soul-searching secret technique. After Chu Mu said those words, the first refinement cultivator's eyes trembled. The word soul-searching secret technique made one feel uneasy. It came from the soul and made one's hair stand on end. You won't have a good ending if you go against the imperial dynasty. The first refinement cultivator roared once more. Chu Mu reached out his right hand and grabbed his head, activating the Mo Luo secret technique. The Mo Luo secret technique was an extremely cruel secret technique of the demon path in the ancient era. Its use was to search the soul. It searched the soul of the other party and extracted the memories within. The consequence was that the other party's soul would be damaged and dissipated. As for the person who used the Mo Luo secret technique, they would also receive a strong impact from reading the other party's memories. If one's soul wasn't strong enough and their will wasn't firm enough, they would fall into chaos and their soul would be damaged. Even if one could withstand it, the Mo Luo secret technique couldn't be used too often. Too many external memories would cause unnecessary disturbances. In the ancient era, the demon path experts who mastered the soul-searching secret technique were terrifying. But at the same time, they didn't have a good ending. A portion of them were killed by others, while a portion of them died from the backlash of the soul-searching secret technique. Their memories were in chaos, and they lost their rationality. They went crazy and died in the end. Under the activation of the Mo Luo secret technique, the first refinement expert of the imperial court began to tremble all over. His face paled and then twisted. He let out heart-chilling screams as he struggled. However, Chu Mu's arm was extremely steady. It was like a mountain. No matter how the other party struggled, he couldn't break free at all. Chu Mu's eyes flickered with a strange light. There seemed to be countless words and images flickering in his eyes like a river. At the same time, Chu Mu endured the impact of the other party's memories. That kind of feeling was like a rock had been stuffed into his brain. His brain was constantly being stuffed until it felt like it was about to explode. Even his own thoughts were clearly affected. However, he forcefully endured it. Chu Mu's soul was different from ordinary people. It was the fusion of two souls, so it was much stronger. His will was also incomparably tough due to his various experiences. This kind of impact was completely within his range of tolerance. A person's experiences, especially one who had cultivated to the first refinement, would definitely be extremely rich. The contents of the memories would be extremely complex and vast. Chu Mu couldn't accept them all, so he had to make a choice. Chu Mu only wanted to find the imperial court's headquarters. He didn't care about anything else. Time passed slowly. The person kept trembling. His face was pale and twisted. His aura became weaker and weaker, as if his flame of life had been burned away. He was on the verge of death. An hour. After an entire hour, Chu Mu finally loosened his palms. A trace of exhaustion flashed through his eyes, and he promptly closed his eyes. The first refinement expert's head tilted to the side. There was no sign of life in him at all. His face was frighteningly pale and twisted. His eyes were filled with terror. One could see that he had suffered unimaginable torture before he died. A moment later, Chu Mu opened his eyes. "Found it," said Chu Mu. His gaze seemed to pierce through the roof and see where the imperial court was. After War King returned to the imperial court, he gave the order to go into seclusion. During the 2 years in the Devil Burial Abyss, even though he didn't obtain the low-grade demon spirit body, he did gain other things. So he went into seclusion to refine them and increase his strength. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed since War King returned to the imperial court. He still hadn't come out. Everything in the imperial court was normal. They didn't know that one of their branches had been destroyed. The imperial court's headquarters was located on a mountain. This mountain was called the Divine Mountain by the people of the imperial court. At this moment, 6 people who didn't belong to the imperial court arrived at the Divine Mountain of the imperial court. These 6 people were Chu Mu's group. When they arrived at the mountain and looked up, they didn't see the so-called palaces. If it wasn't for the fact that the memories from the Mo Luo secret technique wouldn't lie, Chu Mu would be suspicious too. However, he already knew that the reason why they couldn't see it was because of some special seals. Without any hesitation, they quickly went up and took action to break the seal. A large group of palaces appeared in front of Chu Mu and the others. The instant the seals were broken, the people of the imperial court knew about it. Soon, the imperial court's warriors appeared and surrounded Chu Mu's group. "Take them down." Without saying anything, the imperial court's warriors attacked, wanting to capture Chu Mu's group. One had to know that the imperial court's headquarters had always been a secret. Now that someone had come here, they had to capture them and interrogate them. However, the 5 peerless experts in the imperial court were already dead. War King was in seclusion, and the mysterious Ji sure didn't appear either. The people who attacked Chu Mu's group were only saints. Even if they were at the peak of the 9-star saint realm, they were still saints. Not everyone could be compared to Chu Mu. Die. Lei Ba roared, and countless bolts of lightning descended from the heavens, bringing with them terrifying, destructive power. They covered the thousands of meters in front of them, and they caused hundreds of powerful saints to be reduced to dust. It's a peerless expert. Set up the formation. The expressions of the imperial court's warriors changed drastically. Only now did they know what kind of strong enemy they were facing. They reacted quickly and immediately set up a huge battle formation. Under the operation of the formation, the imperial court's warriors' strength was gathered, and the yuan qi of heaven and earth around them was strengthened. Everyone took a look and knew that this was an extremely tight and complicated battle formation. It was also an extremely profound battle formation. After another large wave of martial saints had set it up, it even had the terrifying power to kill an exceptional elite. Of course, this referred to killing an exceptional elite of the first refinement. It was unable to kill an exceptional elite of the second refinement. However, it could, to a certain extent, resist an exceptional elite of the second refinement. "It's time to destroy the imperial court." Lei Ba chuckled. The oppression and pursuit back then were still fresh in his mind. Now, it was finally time to pay it back. Not only Lei Ba, but the others also revealed a sinister smile. "This is a good activity that falls from the sky. Cool phones are waiting for you. Click on the Chinese network's official account, add a friend on WeChat, add a public account, type Kdred, and participate immediately. Everyone has a prize. Follow Kdred's official account now." Chapter 1961. How could saints fight against peerless cultivators, especially when they were a group of peerless cultivators? After a short while, the 9-star saints of the imperial dynasty died one after another. They didn't feel any joy because those 9-star saints were just ordinary members of the imperial dynasty. Even if they all died, as long as the imperial dynasty didn't collapse, they could still nurture new ones. The 10 kings were the core of the imperial dynasty. Apart from them, there were also the 4 strange and powerful cultivators who had appeared in the Tianshan domain. Who knew how many of them there were in the imperial dynasty? The 10 kings and those mysterious and powerful cultivators were the ones they had to deal with. They were also the ones they were afraid of. Because of that, they didn't run around randomly after killing the saints of the imperial dynasty. Instead, they attacked and destroyed everything in order to force out the other strong cultivators of the imperial dynasty. 2/3 refinement cultivators, and the others are at least second refinement cultivators. Ji sure estimated the strength of Chu Mu and the others. He was right about the other 5, but he was wrong about Chu Mu because Chu Mu hadn't attacked since he appeared. Ji sure himself was also a peerless expert. Very few people knew his true strength, but he knew very well that although he was not weak, he was only at the peak of the second refinement. He could not fight against a peerless expert of the third refinement. Moreover, he was best at the art of divination. In terms of combat ability, he could only be considered average. The 5 celestial generals are dead. Lord Battle King is in seclusion. Ji sure thought. After Battle King came back, he left some instructions and went into seclusion. He didn't expect that Chu Mu and the others would be able to leave the demon burial abyss alive. Moreover, they found the Imperial Divine Mountain and attacked the headquarters of the Imperial Dynasty. They slaughtered the Imperial Dynasty soldiers and caused great damage. Many palaces collapsed under their attacks and turned into ruins. Ji sure didn't dare to show himself because he knew that he wouldn't be able to do anything. He would only add one more life. He was secretly anxious, but he didn't dare to act rashly. Right now, he was doing his best to hide his aura so that he wouldn't be discovered. However, if he moved, perhaps a little bit of his aura would be released and captured by the other party. For a moment, Ji sure didn't know what to do. He had the ability to calculate, but at this moment he couldn't do anything. Not long later, all the palaces in the Imperial Dynasty collapsed and turned into ruins. One could say that, on the surface, the Imperial Dynasty was wiped out. Of course, in truth, the foundations of the Imperial Dynasty were still there and could be rebuilt. However, the death of the soldiers and the destruction of the palace was a heavy blow to the prestige of the Imperial Dynasty. Where are the Imperial Dynasty experts? Lei Ba's eyes swept over, and there seemed to be countless bolts of lightning in his eyes. Their goal here wasn't just to destroy the Imperial Dynasty's palace. They wanted to kill the experts of the Imperial Dynasty and weaken their strength. They wanted to eradicate the Imperial Dynasty. However, the experts of the Imperial Court had yet to appear. Just as Lei Ba's voice faded, numerous figures seemed to have broken out from the mountain and soared into the sky, appearing before the crowd. There were a total of 18 figures, and all of them were wearing armor. Only a pair of emotionless eyes could be seen. They didn't seem like the eyes of a living person. Their auras were also extremely strange, as if they were between life and death. The instant the 18 figures appeared, Chu Mu's gaze landed on 4 of them. He was instantly shocked. Whether it was their aura or appearance, Chu Mu could recognize them. They were the 4 strange experts of the Imperial Dynasty that he had fought in the Tian Shan domain. They couldn't be killed, nor could they be destroyed. In the end, they had to use their attacks to break the space and create a black hole that sucked in the flesh and blood that Chu Mu had destroyed. Logically speaking, the 4 of them should have died after being sliced into pieces by Chu Mu's sword and then sucked into the black hole. Even if they didn't die, it would be impossible for them to recover. However, the impossible had become possible. Right now, they appeared before Chu Mu and the others in perfect condition. Moreover, their auras were the same as before. They hadn't weakened in the slightest. Actually, when the 4 of them were summoned back, their strength had been reduced to the extreme. However, their cultivation techniques were special and they recovered quickly. In just a few short years, they had completely recovered. Right now, the Battle King was temporarily in seclusion. The other 9 kings had been in seclusion for many years and wouldn't appear so easily. In order to protect the Imperial Dynasty, the Imperial Guards had no choice but to appear. This was originally their responsibility. It was fine if they didn't appear, but once they appeared, they had to kill all the intruders. Only then could they prevent the news from spreading. They were still a hidden power of the Imperial dynasty. This was like a trump card. If others didn't know about it, even if they guessed, they wouldn't be able to make any plans. The 18 Imperial Guards surrounded Chu Mu's group of 6. Each and every one of them emitted an incomparably terrifying aura. High second refinement, peak second refinement, extreme second refinement, half a step into the third refinement. There were even true third refinement cultivators. With his sharp senses, Chu Mu discovered that among the 18 Imperial Guards, there were 3 who had reached the third refinement. 2 of them were at the initial third refinement, and 1 was at the middle third refinement. Such strength was already extremely shocking, especially when these Imperial Guards had the ability to not be killed. Even if they were chopped into pieces, they could quickly recover. Such an ability was extremely shocking and made people feel a chill in their hearts. Chu Mu was completely certain that the middle third refinement Imperial Guards would definitely be more difficult to deal with compared to the other high third refinement Imperial Guards. You guys are the hidden power of the Imperial dynasty, right? Wang Sun laughed. His figure flickered and disappeared. After his strength increased, Wang Sun's concealment ability was even more shocking. However, he still couldn't hide from the third refinement Imperial Guards. Kill. The middle third refinement Imperial Guard, who was also the commander of the Imperial Guards, only said one word. His old voice sounded as if he had one foot in a coffin. It was weak and lifeless. Under the command, the Imperial Guard didn't hesitate. He directly drew his sword and slashed out. The 18 Imperial Guards attacked at the same time. They didn't show any mercy. Once they attacked, they would definitely kill Chu Mu's group. They wouldn't give the slightest chance to escape. The instant the Imperial Guards attacked, the rest of the group also counterattacked. Feng Wuhan's sword brought about a terrifying storm as it roared. The strength of a beginner of the third refinement was fully displayed. The shocking sword light shattered the vacuum and everything in its path. Xia Yongshuan's sword light seemed to have turned into grayish-white snowflakes that fell from the sky. Unknowingly, there was a desolate feeling between heaven and earth. The grayish-white snowflakes fell. They were faintly discernible, as if they were illusory. However, they carried shocking killing intent as they attacked the Imperial Guards. Kong Lu clasped his hands together and suddenly separated them. The space in front of him was also directly split by his hands. Terrifying cracks spread out and extended to the body of one of the Imperial Guards. Lei Ba clenched his fists and retracted them. He fiercely attacked again, turning into 2 lightning dragons that rushed out amidst rumbling sounds. Wang Sun hid in the darkness of the void, waiting for the opportunity to deal a fatal blow. With the eternal spiritual sword in hand, Chu Mu didn't hesitate. He directly used the sword domain transformation, directly activating the power of the eternal spiritual sword. Together with his own strength, he used a sword move, Eternal Vitality. This move was the complete Eternal Vitality. Chu Mu had comprehended a new true intent in the past 2 years. It was called the true intent of life. Together with the true intent of sword and the true intent of life, the power of this move surpassed that of the Tao Cutter. The lotus of the Eternal Vitality sword move directly hit a third refinement Imperial Guard. As the lotus spun continuously, it released an endless amount of power that continuously attacked the third refinement Imperial Guard's body. The armor on his body was torn apart, and his flesh was torn apart. With his powerful, self-healing ability, the third refinement Imperial Guard was constantly recovering. However, he was constantly being cut by the Eternal Vitality sword move. It was in a state of balance, and he couldn't attack again. He could only continuously resist the power of the Eternal Vitality sword move. Now that Chu Mu had comprehended the true intent of life and integrated it with the eternal sword intent, the power of the Eternal Vitality sword move had reached an unbelievable level. His purpose of using this move was to see if he could kill the Imperial Guards. Based on the current situation, it seemed very difficult to do so. Chu Mu slashed out again with endless growth sword style. With 3 consecutive slashes, Chu Mu attacked 3 third refinement Imperial Guards. As for the other 15 Imperial Guards that had yet to reach third refinement, they were dealt with by Feng Wuheng and the others. Break! The commander of the third refinement middle stage Imperial Guard was extremely powerful. He forcibly resisted the might of the endless cycle of life and growth sword style and shattered it with his tyrannical strength. The wounds on his body also instantly healed. It seemed that the stronger Imperial Guard was, the more powerful his self-healing ability was. We are the Undying Imperial Guards. We followed the Undying Saint Emperor to establish the Imperial dynasty. Other than the Saint Emperor, no one can kill us. The commander of the Royal Guard spoke with an aged and lifeless voice. That voice contained the weight and vicissitudes of life as if it had traveled through history. Undying Saint Emperor. Chu Mu repeated this title. This was the first time he knew that the Imperial dynasty had been established by someone called the Undying Saint Emperor. Every Saint Emperor had his own title. For example, the Heavenly Ancient Saint Emperor, the Tao Emperor, and the Demon Emperor of the Antiquity Age. With the word Undying as his title, the Undying Saint Emperor must be very terrifying. However, so what? In this era, Saint Emperors didn't appear. Undying? Then let me see if you can really not die. Chu Mu's lips curled into a cold smile. Chapter 1962. Annihilation, Sword Essence. Among the various powers in the world, it was more terrifying than the power of destruction. It was the destruction of destruction, an extreme power born purely for destruction. After grasping this power, although it hadn't been long, Chu Mu still hadn't encountered anything that could resist the destruction of the annihilation sword intent. Therefore, Chu Mu was very confident in the annihilation sword essence. He also wanted to know if his annihilation sword essence could cause any damage to the Imperial Guard's immortal power. Although he had yet to try it, Chu Mu was very confident. He clenched his left hand into a fist and a grayish-black aura spread out. The void was silently eroded and disappeared. A sword appeared in Chu Mu's hand. This was a grayish-black sword. It was very pure and exuded a pure aura that made one's heart palpitate. This sword had a name. It was called the Annihilation Spiritual Sword. This sword was nurtured by Chu Mu in his dantian using the innate spiritual sword embryo. After it was formed, it was refined again and again with the power of the Annihilation Sword Essence. Finally, it contained the power of the Annihilation Sword Essence and became the Annihilation Spiritual Sword. The newly formed Annihilation Spiritual Sword was like the eternal spiritual sword in the past. It was a lower-grade spiritual sword, but its power surpassed that of an ordinary middle-grade spiritual sword. Chu Mu had refined the Death Sword spirit into it, raising the grade of the Annihilation Spiritual Sword to a middle-grade spiritual sword. Its power was comparable to those powerful upper-grade spiritual swords. It was very shocking. With the Annihilation Spiritual Sword in hand, Chu Mu's aura increased again. Without probing, he slashed out with his sword. Common life, deathly silence. Chu Mu thought. Suddenly, a grayish-black sword radiance seemed to be elongated and extended endlessly from one side of the sky to the other, as if there was no end to it. This was a completely new sword move. It was comprehended by Chu Mu from the refined death sword spirit. It was on the same level as eternal vitality, from the sword spirit of death. Chu Mu had also comprehended the true intent of death, which was the opposite of the true intent of life. This caused the power of deathly silence to increase further. The endless life sword style was a continuous attack with sword chi. It was very suitable when paired with the eternal sword will. On the other hand, the silent life sword style was paired with the annihilation sword will. Its power was even more shocking. Unlike the endless life sword style, the silent life sword style focused all of its power into a single sword chi. The annihilation sword intent, the annihilation spiritual sword, and the death sword spirit caused the might of this sword chi to reach its peak. As the sword slashed out, a crack was silently annihilated in the void. The incomparably terrifying power of annihilation and death was exuding extermination. Nothing in the world could stop it. The boundless sword chi struck a third refinement initial stage undying royal guard. The shocking sharpness was like a sharp blade cutting through paper. It cut through the undying royal guard's armor and body. "You won't be able to kill me." After the royal guard's body was cut open, he was not afraid at all. Instead, he laughed loudly. He knew that his undying power could instantly heal his body. However, this time it was ineffective. He could feel that within his body that was cut open, there was an incomparably terrifying power that was continuously corroding his body. It was continuously destroying the undying power within his body. He panicked. The reason why the undying royal guards could not die was because of the so-called undying power within their bodies. This undying power was given to them by the undying Saint Emperor. After many years of cultivation, they had accumulated a huge amount of undying power. However, at this moment, the undying power was being consumed at a terrifying speed. Impossible! What kind of power is this? The undying royal guard screamed in fear. After the sword chi cut through his body, it cut through the bodies of two other undying royal guards, causing destruction. The two undying royal guards were only second refinement, initial stage undying royal guards. Facing the silent life sword chi, their resistance was even weaker. They let out mournful cries. This scene caused the other undying royal guards to feel fear. The reason why they were fearless was because they knew that they had grasped the undying power. After countless years of cultivation, the undying power was extremely majestic. It was enough to support them for a very long battle. Once they stopped fighting, their undying power would slowly recover. Moreover, it would continuously increase as they cultivated. Being undying was their greatest reliance. They could let loose and display their strength to their heart's content. They could fight with their enemies to their heart's content until they killed their enemies. However, at this moment, there was actually someone who could deal with them. They could not help but feel fear. "Kill him!" The commander of the undying royal guard's aged voice exploded with shocking killing intent. Holding his sword, he became one with his sword and turned into a terrifying sword light. It streaked across the void and attacked Chu Mu. This sword strike shattered the dome of the sky. It was enough to threaten advanced third refinement initial stage undying royal guards. It was also enough to threaten Chu Mu. Chu Mu had to die. Otherwise, his strength would be a fatal blow to the undying royal guards. When the commander of the royal guards attacked, the other early third refinement initial stage undying royal guard attacked as well. The two of them attacked together and killed Chu Mu in one move. 6-da sword style. On each side, there were 3 pitch-black vortexes revolving. One side contained the eternal sword intent, which was unparalleled in terms of defense. The other side contained the annihilation sword intent, which was incomparable in terms of destruction. The two undying royal guards' all-out attacks were blocked by the 6-da sword style. The power of their sword was completely absorbed. Even the 6-da sword style could not break through the vortexes. The eternal sword intent was unique in terms of defense. It made the 3 pitch-black vortexes even more stable. Among them, the true intent of vibration shattered the absorbed power. When they worked together, they could absorb more power and withstand more power. As for the annihilation sword intent, it was destructive. When it worked together with the true intent of vibration, it shattered the absorbed power. It could not affect the 3 pitch-black vortexes at all. After completely blocking the 2/3 refinement initial stage undying royal guards' sword techniques, Chu Mu quickly counterattacked. A sword slashed down from the sky. The terrifying power quietly tore the void apart. Unparalleled power slashed out. With one sword, the early third refinement initial stage undying royal guard was split apart. The annihilation sword intent and death energy wantonly destroyed, eroded, and wore down his undying energy. Chu Mu's figure flashed, leaving many afterimages as he charged towards the third refinement middle stage immortal royal guard commander. His two swords unleashed a torrential barrage of attacks. Every sword attack was a perfect combination of speed and power, displaying its might to the extreme. Every sword attack carried fatal killing intent. The undying royal guard commander was dumbfounded. He had followed the undying Saint Emperor and established the imperial dynasty. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had gone through tens of thousands of battles. His battle experience was incomparably rich. He had encountered all kinds of opponents. When facing different opponents, he had an extremely strong ability to counter them. He was good at controlling the battle rhythm. However, he discovered that the opponent he was facing was different from any opponent he had encountered before. The terrifying dual sword technique was like two people with incomparable tacit understanding besieging him. Moreover, each sword attack had a variety of styles. It could be domineering, sharp, strange, gentle, or slow. In short, there were countless variations contained within the two swords. It was tiring for him to deal with. Moreover, the opponent had grasped a terrifying power that could destroy his undying energy. He was like a nemesis. Perhaps even the undying Saint Emperor who had created the undying royal guards did not expect that there would be a day where there would be a terrifying power that could destroy his undying energy. Facing Chu Mu's attacks, the undying royal guard commander did not have any ability to counterattack. He could only constantly defend and dodge. However, under the heart and sword as one, all of his reactions were controlled by Chu Mu. His body was constantly struck by the sword. Although the eternal sword intense power could not destroy his undying energy, it could contend against it, making it difficult for it to be used. On the other hand, the annihilation sword intense power could annihilate the undying energy. The undying royal guard commander's body was constantly struck by the sword. His armor, with astonishing defensive power, was simply unable to withstand Chu Mu's dual swords. More and more wounds appeared on his body. His undying energy was constantly being consumed, and his own strength was also weakening. The four undying royal guards who had been struck by the sword could not heal themselves like before. Although they were not dead, they were only struggling on the verge of death and had lost their ability to fight. The other undying royal guards felt fear in their hearts. They were unable to perfectly display their strength and were directly suppressed by Feng Wuhen and the others. Feng Wuhen and Xia Yongshuan's strength were both at the initial third refinement. They completely surpassed this group of undying royal guards. If it were not for their undying energy, the two of them would have already killed them. Die. The two swords crossed, and the heaven and earth cross tore through the air. It was unstoppable. The undying royal guard commander's body was directly sliced into pieces. Affected by the eternal sword intent and annihilation sword intent, he was not dead yet. However, he could not heal himself and had completely lost his ability to fight. In order to end the battle quickly, Chu Mu's figure flashed, and he turned into a sword light. He swept past the other undying royal guards and slashed out mercilessly with his two swords. Soon, the 18 undying royal guards were all struck. Their undying energy was continuously being destroyed, and they could not heal themselves. What exactly are these things? How can they not die? Lei Ba asked in shock as he looked at the undying royal guards that Chu Mu had cut apart. Previously, when they attacked, the injuries they dealt to this group of undying royal guards had healed themselves in the blink of an eye. Facing these undying enemies that could instantly heal themselves, they had a headache. Fortunately, they had Chu Mu. I'm not sure. However, they should be the secret power of the imperial court, said Feng Wuhen. This kind of secret power that could not be killed was indeed terrifying. If it were not for Chu Mu, they would not be a match for them at all. Even if they were stronger, they could not do anything to them. In the end, they would either leave or be exhausted to death. They are all dead." Shi's body trembled. He did not know about the existence of the undying royal guards. However, the appearance of the undying royal guards had brought him great hope. Now that hope had been shattered,